All right, well, why don't we begin? So welcome everyone to the select board meeting on Tuesday, March 14th. We are doing this as an all virtual meeting due to this weather outside. Want to briefly review the agenda. We'll have time for community input. We've expanded the time just to allow for more comments if there are people interested. And so what I'd like to do when I finish running through the agenda is just check with whoever's on the call at that point, if you'd indicate whether you have something you'd like to say during community input, and then I can sort of determine how much time we need to parcel out for folks. Following that, we have an appointment to make. Then we'll have an update on the police chief search and hear from the chair, Travis Snell, on what the results. Then we have time on the budget, followed by discussion of the we'll review the warrants, and then there are two in particular where we're going to have presentations. We'll not be making any decisions tonight, but we'll get kind of a briefing on two of them. And then we have a discussion about an opioid settlement, followed by the review of the House Doctor on-call designer selection, then the town administrator's report, followed by liaison reports, and we have no minutes to review tonight. So having said that, would anyone who is interested in offering a comment during community input, would you either turn on your video and raise your hand, or indicate by going down to the reactions box?
I'll just shout, so I don't know how to do the reactions box. I'll do. There we go.
Okay, let me check and see if anyone else is interested. Okay. And Christina has a comment. Okay, and I see that Travis has joined us. Hi, Travis. That's great. Okay, so why don't we begin, Christina, with you, and then followed by you, John.
Yeah, I'll be quick. Barney.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks. I know the select board and FinCom have a big balancing act to do when it comes to addressing the needs of the town. But I would like to strongly advocate for the sustainability coordinator position or equivalent staff support. The ESC has hit the ground sprinting and has maintained an overwhelming pace with the expectation or hope that there would be enhanced dedicated staff to support moving forward, as is recommended in the master plan. Our current pace is not sustainable. The amount of time, energy, and effort that the ESC members and our part-time sustainability coordinator have expended is amazing, even though it may not be evident to most. We are a committee of very dedicated volunteers with a monumental task to address, and our mission is much broader than many other town committees. We are passionate about a mission, but we are already experiencing burnout. Committee chair should not have to dedicate day and night to managing the mounds of committee work and emails from all different directions that land in her lap. It truly is 24/7, and I don't know how Debbie does that. And respectfully, I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit. The town and the select board state that environmental sustainability is a priority. Well, creating a committee and saying that we have addressed the environmental issue is not enough. It's time for words to be translated into actions and to stop kicking environmental issues to the bottom of the list. You say you support the idea of environmental sustainability, so please show that you do. And you say that the select board has a goal to prevent volunteer burnout and to provide support to volunteer committees. So please provide that support. We need a sustainability coordinator staff position. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Lavery.
Thank you, Barney. So I've been coming to these meetings for quite some time and trying to make points and failing basically to get you guys to engage with me. And so I'm questioning my approach. And so what I decided to do was, instead of like bringing a topic up and asking like, look, I want to talk about this right now, which you don't do, to give you some advance warning. So I'm going to try to, well, I'm going to bring up a topic tonight and I want to talk about it in the public meeting section next week. Give you guys some time to reflect on it in the meantime. So the topic I want to speak to in the public comments section 2 weeks from now, I think that's the next meeting, is the Cranberry Bog House. Specifically the fact that we have tenants there. The town of Carlisle is a landlord. The tenants don't pay any rent. They're basically functionally squatters. It's not clear that the building is actually certified for occupancy. There's no lease. There's no rent. There's no services. The town pays a tremendous, or has paid a tremendous amount of money, depending on your bank account, something like $250,000 over the past 4 or 5 years to maintain that building. I think we should talk about that. So I will bring that up in our next meeting. And just looking backwards, at any time during these public comment sections, if you guys do want to have a back and forth, if you guys do want to have a Q&A, I'm open to it on any of the topics that I brought up, past or forward. That's it.
Thank you, John. All right, then let's go into the first item on the agenda after input is the appointment of Carol Grunike. And Ryan, would you like to speak to that first?
I would. So we are bringing Carol in front of the board today for your consideration for appointment to the interim position. She comes highly recommended in your packet from Joan, who I think, besides the Council on Aging and Human Services, worked with her the most. I don't think that I'm wrong in saying that the Council on Aging and Human Services also supports the interim appointment. And I've been received from Carol a work plan, what she'll be focusing on. And we've talked about how she can balance the workload between the director position and, sorry, I'm getting a message here, between her social work position and the director position. So hoping that we can appoint Carol tonight as the interim, who will serve in that position until we can finish the hiring process. And Carol is well aware, for the board and the public's information, that if she is to apply for the director's job, we want a full search and a full vetting, so she would enter the candidate process.
So I move that the select board appoint Carol Grunike as the acting Council on Aging and Human Services Director as recommended by the outgoing COAHS Director Joan Ingersoll, Town Administrator, and the Council on Aging and Human Services Board.
Second.
Any discussion?
I've worked with Carol. I think will make a fine interim, if not permanent, but when we get to that process, but certainly I think it's a good choice for interim.
I agree. I have a lot of confidence in Carol's ability to keep everything moving along well. Any other comments? All right, then we'll do this as a roll call vote. All those in favor of the motion, Arnold, aye.
Brown eye. Modell eye.
Reed, aye.
Snell eye.
All right, the motion carries unanimously. Welcome, Carol, and thank you for taking this on. The next item is the police chief search and the results of the screening committee. And I'm going to turn it over to Travis, or the chair. Thank you, Travis.
Great. Thanks, Barney. And thank you all. So as you know by now, our screening committee, the police chief screening committee, has reached a conclusion and provided the select board with 3 candidates that it ranked in order. And I'm assuming everyone can hear me. Is that okay? Okay, great. But I just wanted to, before I kind of go over that, just step back and quickly walk through what the screening committee did. We established a charter, the select board established a charter for the screening committee to which is published on Carlisle's website. The select board selected 7 members of the committee. Those were myself as the select board representative, Joan Ingersoll, who's the former director of the Council on Aging and Human Services, Kirk Bishop, who is a dispatch professional at the Carlisle Communications Department, Andrew Corwin, who is an officer in the Carlisle Police Department, Gina Fox is a community representative, Deepa Chungi is also a community representative, and Matthew Herwick is a community representative. And obviously, Brian and Aubrey helped out immensely in coordinating a lot of the work that we did on the committee. We started, as you know, the select board hired a consulting firm, public safety consultants, to help us through this process. And public safety consultants worked to obtain a total of 36 resumes that were submitted to the town of Carlisle for this position. Our committee then went through all of those resumes and met and culled those down to 13 candidates that we thought were the best qualified. From those 13, 2 dropped out, and we had 10 candidates who submitted a writing sample to the committee. The committee reviewed those writing samples, and some of the questions that were asked of that were generated by the committee with questions that were appropriate for our community. From those writing samples, we narrowed it down to 6 kind of semi-finalists at that point that as we were continued to screen, and those 6 underwent Zoom interviews. Those Zoom interviews were conducted by the 2 police officers, the 2 chiefs of police who run the public safety consultants. And many of those questions they had a series of questions for the candidates, but they also asked for our committee's input. So we provided questions that were answered. The committee was able to watch those Zoom interviews to better understand each candidate. And from those, we narrowed it down to what we thought is the best 3 candidates. And that it was with guidance as well from the public safety consultants. The 3 candidates then underwent an intensive assessment center, which is where they spent approximately half a day being interviewed by 4 police chiefs who put them through various 5 different sort of role play scenarios where they had to respond to real difficult challenges, and the chiefs assessed how they handled it. They have a very quantitative type of ranking that they've used, and they rank those candidates based on their performance within that assessment center. From that, the public safety consultants provided a ranking to our committee. And the ranking it was as follows: Lieutenant Colleen Dunbar McLean, Lieutenant Andrew Amendola, and then Lieutenant Todd Ahern. And those were the 3 candidates in the ranked order that the public safety consultants deemed were the top candidates and in the order. Our committee then reviewed that, coupled with all of the information that we'd had to date, which was their resumes, their writing samples, and the Zoom interviews. And we met in public on Monday to discuss that and come up with our ranking based on our community input and who we think would be best for the town of Carlisle. We submitted that ranking to the select board, and that ranking is consistent with the chiefs and how they ranked. And so the number 1 candidate is Colleen Dunbar McLean, number 2 is Andrew Amendola, and number 3 is Todd Ahern. Their information, their resumes and cover letters were included in the select board packet. So I'm assuming that each of the select board members has had a chance to review those. And with that, I would suggest that we would move Lieutenant Colleen Dunbar McLean forward as the finalist for the police chief for the town of Carlisle. But I'm happy to answer any questions you have, or if you wanted further information. I don't particularly want to go into too much detail within each, but I'll answer on behalf of the committee, or certainly for anything you need.
Questions from the rest of the board, comments?
Yeah, just Travis, I just see a lot of names here that I don't recognize. Are there any members of the consulting firm here tonight?
That would be Wayne Sampson or Russ Stevens. And
Okay,
looking right now, I don't know if either of those two are on the phone, and I don't know if they were asked to be here either.
Travis and Nathan, I spoke to Russ today. So the consulting firm has given the results of the assessment and handed it to the screening committee. So they are not here to provide any additional information. But I can speak to the process or our conversation today if it's helpful.
okay, thanks.
I have a question. Were the candidates, let me see how I can phrase it exactly. Were they kind of close, you know, were they spread out? How, give us some idea about your ranking.
Sure. Yep, Kate, that's a great question. So let me tell you how the committee voted. I think that, and that's obviously a public meeting on Monday. We had a over 2-hour discussion on these candidates and how we were going to rank them. When we took our final ranking and our final vote on the ranking, Colleen Dunbar-McLean was the #1 ranked candidate. And of the 7 committee members, she received 6 of 7 affirmative votes as the #1 candidate. The #2 candidate, Andrew Amendola, received 4 votes in favor of him ranking #2 and 3 votes which were not in favor of him ranking #2. So presumably that the final candidate, which had a vote of 4 votes in favor and 3 not in favor. So, you know, it would flip. I think that there was definitely a majority that ranked them in this order, but the 2 and 3 were, I'd say, a little more contested, whereas the #1 candidate was far and away the best candidate and of these 3, and that's how the board voted. At least that's how the vote is reflected. Is I would say of the community members and the 3 town employees who were associated with this committee. That's how we voted.
Yeah, so it sounds like the cream definitely rose to the top.
Well, you know, Kate, I actually wouldn't say that. I would say that all 3 candidates here are very highly qualified, and they would each, I think, be, we wouldn't have put them forward if we didn't think that they could be the police chief of Carlisle. But I do think that it was very clear that Colleen Dunbar-McLean made the top grade in this ranking.
Yeah, it would seem to me like you started with how many people? How many resumes?
We had 36 candidates.
36, narrowed down to 3. They're clearly all very good candidates. But you said there were, for the second candidate, there were 4 in favor of them being the second candidate. Were they the one that the person who did not vote for the first candidate, were they that person's first vote? So was it 4-1 in favor of first, and then how did that work?
Well, if I would say that I don't know if I can get into too much detail, because we just ranked 1, 2, and 3. And so but I think that the one person who voted against having Colleen Dunbar-McLean, the #1 candidate, would have preferred the #3 candidate.
Okay. And they weren't, just to be clear, because I think this is super important as we're talking about these
Sure,
candidates.
sure.
People weren't voting against them being the number one candidate. It was just the other candidate got more votes.
Correct. And
Right.
and each one of these is a qualified candidate. This was just that we had to put forward a ranking to you, to the board here, to us, as to who we thought, based on our research and in our study of all these candidates, who was the best candidate. And what I'm trying to make clear here is that there was one candidate that the committee thought was stood out the most based on the number of votes for the first candidate.
And Travis, this may be an unfair question, but is there a way to speak to what the qualities or experience or, test results, what was it that put this one candidate in the number one position?
Well, my understanding is that the public safety consultants has a very standardized and quantitative process for professionally evaluating these candidates. And within their evaluation, I think they had over 125 separate evaluations that they rank on different situations. And the thing that I was not at the assessment center, the way that this process works is that we could not have a public assessment center. So we had 3 representatives from the selection or screening committee at this assessment center to watch. They could not participate or ask questions or anything, but they could watch and observe. And they reported back to our selection or screening committee about what they saw. And the chiefs obviously talked about that as well afterwards. And those differences between the candidates, they had a professional ranking and talked about certain scenarios where some performed better than others. And that's what brought them up with created their ranking of this, of these candidates. I don't know if that answers your question or not, or if there's something.
Yes, thanks.
So was that from their rankings, it was a very objective process.
Yes, that's what they stressed, that and the members of the screening committee who attended this were very impressed with the way in which that process was handled, because they had 5 separate exercises. And rather than have one candidate go through all exercises and then evaluate them, they took time for each candidate to go through each exercise and then evaluate them immediately after that exercise, with certain criteria that they use and standardize for each candidate.
So
I think,
go ahead, Nathan.
yeah, I was just going to say, I don't think this is going to be a surprise to anybody. I mean, this, from my opinion, I really appreciate all the work that the committee put in. It sounds like a fabulous process. This is our police chief that we're selecting, and we have, strong candidates that are being presented. I would like for us to be able to interview with at least 2 of them, if not all 3. It's just such a critically important role. We did it for the fire chief. We did it for the town administrator. We narrowed it down. I think in all of those, they narrowed it down and we interviewed all of them because they were all highly recommended. So that would be my preference.
Kate or David, would you like to speak to that question? I have a comment too, but I'd like to hear from others first.
You don't have a comment, David? I think, you ask a committee to do some work. And I think when you delegate, you have to kind of take that work and take the recommendation as it comes. I think in this case, it looks to me that if 6 out of the 7 of the committee think that this is the best candidate, I don't see why we should be looking at the other 2 to second guess them. And I think it sends a bad signal. And I would rather not mix in our fire chief search in this conversation.
So I agree with what Kate just said. I want to clarify, or at least clarify for me, in addition to 6 out of the 7 selection committee members, my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, Ryan also agrees with the ranking, and the 2 search firm principals, or at least one of them, also agree. Is that true, Travis?
Well, I'll speak on the public safety consultants. They do operate as a team, and they have coordinated this entire process. They coordinated the rankings, which were done in conjunction with 2 other Massachusetts police chiefs, and the 4 of them concluded that this was the ranking that best, professionally at least, best fits the professional ranking standards they utilize. And so, yes, they were in support of this particular ranking profile, and our
So
selection
can
committee
I
wasn't.
endeavor to translate what you just said into simple terms? Do they
Yes.
agree with the rank order?
They agree with it. They agree with it.
Okay, and Ryan, I guess you can speak for yourself, but you indicated you had your own opinion, having observed it. I realize you're not the hiring manager and you're not part of the selection committee, but you did observe the entire process of the weekend, correct?
I did. I had the privilege of being at the assessment center, which was enlightening. It is a process I think that should be used for TAs, police chiefs, et cetera. I think it shows you the differences between candidates. I think the screening committee has done a tremendous job vetting this candidate. In conversations I've had, this is one of the more intense screenings that a police chief has gone through for a town our size. And I think that's a good thing. I think it matters in a small community who your police chief is. I think the vigor of the assessment was very strong. You got to see the differences between the candidates and the way that they would operate in a Carlisle situation. Since all of them are coming from larger communities, I think that was important to see how they would interact with community, with the scenarios that are based off of Carlisle, and the way that they would operate here. I also appreciate the professionalism of our police and dispatch departments weighing in and providing information to the process and what they believe. My recommendation matches the screening committees exactly. It would be 1, 2, and then 3 in order for my recommendation.
Okay, thank you. That's it for me.
I agree as well that I think there's been a very thorough and rigorous process, and I'm comfortable with the work of the screening committee and the consultants combined. And given that the first choice is significantly sort of had a higher set of results, I guess, that I think we should go ahead and interview that person, Colleen McLean. I will say, I can't believe we're hiring another McLean, and then we're going to have McLean, and we seem to be heading in that direction for everything. No, but
it is almost St. Patrick's Day. I remind everyone.
That's true. But no, seriously though, I think we should go ahead and arrange to have an interview with the number 1 candidate. And Nathan, I think we can, as a select board, if for some reason or other we feel that after that interview that really there is something that we want to consider one of the other candidates. I mean, we have that option. Obviously, it's very difficult for the candidates to be in that kind of limbo, but I would support having one candidate for us to interview soon. So
Yeah, so I guess just the
Yeah.
final thing for me is just, I agree with what everybody said about, we put together this committee, we gave them a charge, and they came up with the selection. We are the hiring authority. So we're responsible for a good hire. And so I think just to ensure that if for some reason it doesn't work out, it's not the committee's responsibility for that. It would be ours, because we didn't fully vet all the potential candidates that they had brought up, right? So we didn't delegate everything to them. They did a tremendous amount of work. I'm going to go along with it. That's fine. Let's just interview the one candidate. It was just my preference. But I think, it's not dissing a committee to go ahead and say, thank you for bringing these all forward to us. Thank you for giving us your ranking. And now we're going to, now we're going to interview all the ones that you presented to us. I don't see that as dissing it at all. I think it's us doing our due diligence, but I'm totally fine if we want to go ahead and bring in the top candidate and interview that person. I'm totally fine with that.
all right, well then let's, I guess if we're in agreement, should we make a motion to that effect? That we would like to, so first of all, do we want to have a motion to that effect? Take a vote
Is a
on it.
motion necessary, or we just agree to interview one candidate?
Well, that's what I was asking. I think we're agreeing to,
I don't think it requires a motion.
Okay.
We're in agreement.
so then the second question is, do we want to do this at our select board meeting on the 28th, where potentially Travis he'll be out of the country, so it may be challenging for him to be part of that call. Obviously, he knows this candidate well, but the other thing is that we could decide to have a meeting next week, just for the purposes of the interview. And so what's the feeling of the board about that?
We have to look at the schedule for the 28th.
Yeah, obviously, we'll see that when we get to the draft later tonight.
No, we can go to it. I mean, we can jump to it now, right? Let's take a look.
Well, the other question though, obviously, is though the attendance of Travis or non-attendance.
Well,
So, I think it's important to have the entire board. I mean, although Travis obviously, had a lot of input, but I think he should be there if possible.
I mean, I'm okay with a meeting next week. It should just be about an hour, right? I would think it wouldn't be more than an hour.
Yeah.
Travis, did you have a comment?
No, I'm comfortable. I appreciate your willingness to try and include me, but I'm okay if you wanted to, if it doesn't work logistically, if you want to do it next at the 28th. I may have a conflict. I've told you I'm still working on flights, and I may be, in air without access to even be on a call. So I appreciate that, but whatever works, I'm not, it's okay if I'm not there.
All right, so why don't we, David and Ryan, why don't we do this offline, looking at the agenda, and when we get to that part of this meeting, we can do a quick look at it, but we could also consider whether there's a date. We could follow up and see if there's a date next week that we could all make.
I mean, as long as we're on the topic, since it saves time, does anybody have any conflicts next week in the evening that we should be aware of?
Yeah, Monday's the town caucus.
Yeah, we wouldn't do it then anyway.
Tuesday, Housing Trust is in the evening, but we could do it at 6, and then Housing Trust is at 7. Otherwise, I don't know,
Okay.
Habitat for
I could do it. I could do it
Humanity.
next. I could do it next Tuesday. I'm not sure I could get here for 6 though. But I
Yeah,
could
And I
do
have
it.
a, yeah, sorry.
Okay.
I have a hard stop next Tuesday at, sorry, I'm gonna be in a different time zone, so I'm trying to 2 hours earlier. So yeah, I could do 7
Remote. Sounds
Yeah,
like.
remote.
Yeah, I can't do 7 because I've got housing
All right,
trust.
so we're getting granular now. Okay, so it sounds like,
I could
Tuesday.
also do Wednesday.
Wednesday would be okay.
okay,
Yeah, Wednesday's okay with me too.
okay. All right. Well, I think we could work our way through it. Thank you.
Yeah, okay. Well, excellent. Thank you again to everyone involved in the screening committee and to the consultants and to Aubrey and Ryan. Sounds like it was a really thorough process, and it's very encouraging that we had so many applicants given the climate we're in. So that's terrific, and we look forward to our interview. I'd like to then move on to our budget discussion. Let me just say that we are very close. You know, as you looked at the information in the packet, there are just a few things that are a little different, and Ryan is going to review that. So I think we should try this evening to agree on the operating budget that we want to move forward on. But let's see how we do. With that, I want to turn it over to Ryan. And if you want to look in your, your packet, he's provided us with a summary. And I don't know if you want to put that up on the screen, Ryan, or how you want to do that. Okay, here we go.
That looks
I was muted. Okay, so the summary sheet is just a verbal version of what I can do here. So on the levy analysis sheet, which was the main guidance from the select board and the finance committee, the items of note are the budget request changed based off the expenses, which I'll get to. Nothing surprising. We did everything that we told you that we would do. The one big change that the FinCom made was they recommended taking the sustainability position funding, 65,000 out of the operating budget. So that drove that number down. They correspondingly dropped their free cash recommendation from 300,000 to 235,000. So the impact on the levy with those two changes was a decrease in the proposed tax levy increase to 807,000, which translates to, and again, remember these are estimates and approximates, but a $428 increase on a $1.1 million home, which is the average home, or a 2.69% tax increase and an average tax bill of $16,358. Other changes, which I will get a little bit more detailed on as we move through this spreadsheet. All of the changes combined to include moving some capital items to ARPA and including the Corey Auditorium lighting warrant article, which significantly increases here the total of the warrant articles. The total remaining reserves to include that free cash usage in the operating budget is 12.36%. So still on target for the town's target of reserves. The expense sheet that I sent you, everything in green is merely wages or wage related changes. So to note, the historical line, that employee works about 10 hours a week. So this is an accurate capture of that employee's time, and our average time works 8 to 10 hours a week. So we're trying to budget it correctly. The yellow items are items that have been discussed before, or items that have been discussed before in wage changes, for example, in the town administrator line. And those aren't my wages, just to be clear. The wages that were done were the wage adjustments and the COLA, the 3% COLA that has been quasi approved by conversations between the select board and the FinCom. The one big change that I am noting for the select board is during the parity discussions, we talked about one position in particular, and that is in the treasury department. So right now, building, accounting, and treasury share, treasurer collector share 2 employees, and it's sort of convoluted. The hours, it's historical thing, the way that hours were added and the way the employees were used. So we believe that the most we could gain the most bang for our buck in parity by separating those 2 positions and adding hours to replace one employee that worked in the building department 1 day a week for 6 hours. So there is a $10,000 increase in that change. It is a change in hours. I highlighted this to the finance committee, and I'm highlighting it to you now to make sure that that's transparent. The finance committee did tentatively agree that that was the right move there. So overall,
I'm sorry, Ryan, could you just describe that a little bit more? Like, so there's 2 people now. What exactly again are you doing?
so there's an employee that works half time for the building department, half time for the accounting department, who's under 35 hours. And then we have an employee who works for the treasury department and the building department, who works 6 hours a week for the building department just on Thursdays. So we're recommending that those 6 hours on Thursdays be replaced and put into the treasury department so that that employee just works there. And then the building department and the accounting department would just split time. So right now it just causes desk roulette and other changes, and we just believe it would make it a lot more efficient. And those 2 employees are paid differently despite doing the same thing. So we went ahead and recommended to make the full adjustment.
So is one person's being dedicated and that department's getting the same number of hours, and then another person is having hours added and they're split between 2 departments?
So the hours are being added in the treasury department, and that employee is just going to stay in the treasury department. And building and accounting are going to switch, are going to have just that employee focus there. And both the building commissioner and the town accountant believe that this is the right move.
And so how many hours total would each department have?
So the employees are split time. It's 27 hours and now would be 35 hours. 35 hours split between accounting and building, and 27 in the treasury HR department, really.
Okay.
If it's confusing to you, it was confusing to me too, because I wouldn't have built it that way, but that's just the way history has created these positions.
And this
So-
is an add since we last talked.
Yes, yep.
Okay.
It was discussed in the parity, in terms of parity, because it was either to dramatically increase the wages to match or to create this solution where everybody went into the appropriate department and would be paid correctly. That's why it came up during this time frame. It also makes things more efficient. So overall, the wage estimate that we gave you it came in 25,000 less than we expected, mostly because COLAs was already built into the police department budget. So we gained some funds there. We made that $10,000 change that I just mentioned to you, and then we reduced the police chief and the DPW director positions back down to FY23 levels. We didn't include their COLA adjustments, so that all netted out to be about a 20,000-ish reduction in what we said we were going to expend. So all of that nets out to the tax levy sheet that I mentioned before, and a total operating budget of a 5.01 increase. And we talked about this during Nathan's question last time. If you were to subtract the building and the transfer station increases, which we move from revolving funds into the operating, the total impact of this year's expenses would be 4.56%. And that does not include the sustainability position as well. Other changes in the capital plan recommended right now by the FinCom: the elevator was moved to ARPA at the schools. The school's campus walkway lighting and server room AC were moved to the FY23 operating budget, if it could be filled that way. The wastewater treatment HVAC MUA was moved to ARPA. The plow truck pending for the schools pending further information, was moved out a year to FY25. As previously discussed, the DPW bucket truck and roadside mower moved for further discussion and analysis. They did include 2 cruisers after presentation from the police chief and the FinCom liaison, Victor, who demonstrated the need for the 2 cruisers this year. So the total capital hit is 487, excluding those ARPA requests, all in. And then for warrants, no change in the warrant except the inclusion of the significant cost for the Corey Auditorium lighting that was presented at your last meeting. So to quickly summarize, all of the expense changes that we did, which we believe matched your intent, except for that one that I spent some time discussing, netted out to a budget increase of $34,074,340 or 5.01% increase. That includes the FinCom's recommendation about sustainability and their reduction of free cash uses to 235 for what they believe is the right tax impact for the FY24 budget. So that is the FinCom's budget as it stands right now, presented to you for discussion.
So obviously, one of the items that we need to discuss is the sustainability position and decide as a select board whether we want that to be included in the operating budget or not, or if there's some other proposal about that. Are there any other items in here that select board members want us to take some time to discuss, or it's basically the rest of this acceptable, we're ready to approve the rest of it? Is my question.
When you say the rest of it, what do you mean by that?
The operating budget, as it's laid out here. Now, we obviously need to discuss first, before we finalize the operating budget, we have to discuss first the sustainability position, which we had originally, the last time around it was in the operating budget. FinCom has pulled it out now. So that's a change from the last time we looked at this. There are a few other small changes that Ryan has referenced. I'm asking the question, are there other items in the operating budget that the board wants to discuss tonight?
Got it. Not for me. So thank you for clarifying.
Kate?
Actually, I would like to discuss the budgets of the independent,
Sorry,
sorry,
Say that again?
well, the independent committees. So for instance,
Board of Health, you mean?
well, no, historic, for instance, historical.
Okay.
They have a, $15,000 budget. I'd like to know, how much of it is late wages and how much of it is budget. And if I'm also, I know maybe this is not part of this discussion, but in certain respects, I do think it is. For instance, the so-called sustainability position, I would like to see not put in ESC, but put in town hall. And I think it's important to do that for all kinds of reasons, because one of the functions of that position will be to support a committee, but there are all bunch of other functions that it has that have nothing to do with that committee, or even if it does have something to do with it, aren't under its direct control. So, and we have had in the past, issues with, not enough hours, here or there or everywhere, but then there's one person who was sitting twiddling their thumbs while the other one was overworked, and we were never able to adjust, those functions across town hall. So if it's all in the town hall budget, then it makes, first of all, authority and, responsibility a little clearer. And I have to say, I'm somewhat shocked at how many hours historical gets. I kind of wonder, what they're doing there when there's all these other things that are in town that are going begging for support. or have in the past at least gone begging for support. So that's my,
Brian, do you want to comment on the historical commission? What's included in that budget number?
It's a primarily wages, and I would say that if you gave us wage money for any of these positions, we would fill the time. Everybody's busy. It's just a matter of priorities.
Yeah,
Yeah, so the historical commission deals with permits like all the other ones, and that's why they have the administrative support.
I do think they need the administrative support. I would prefer reorganizing some of the board support positions into municipal assistant positions that could be more flexible and during certain times of years. But that's not historically what's been built here, nor was I charged to do that. But I do see in the future combining some of these through attrition and other things in order to be efficient and to make sure all the boards and committees have support when needed, but not more than they need when they don't.
So I have a question. I think I've asked it the last couple of times we've talked about the budget. Barney, you were saying, voting on it today. Are we not going to hear the arguments from like the police department as to why two police cruisers and things like that? Because every other year we've had presentations from the departments so that we understood better what we were approving. And we pushed back on some things. Are we not going to do that this year? Are we just voting on what FinCom has recommended?
yeah, good question.
I mean, we clearly said one cruiser last time.
Right.
Do we just go with what FinCom said based upon that, or do we do what we have historically done and had people come in and talk through their budget with us? This is our most important role.
Yeah, I think we certainly have the authority to want to discuss that any line item in this operating budget that we want to have more discussion about and bring whomever we'd like to discuss it with us directly. Right now, the process that occurred was, on the police cruiser is that I think in fact, I remember in I believe it was our joint meeting with FinCom, there was a discussion about having Victor Liang as the liaison to the police department, working on that and then coming back with information about it. And so that happened at I didn't attend the last FinCom meeting, but from what I'm told, from what Ryan has said, that happened at the last meeting and they concluded to keep it in the budget based on that information that they received. So I think it's our decision whether we want to visit that directly ourselves before we make a decision about this operating budget. I will just remind us it's, yes, every dollar matters, but it is a relatively small, out of a $34 million budget. It's a smaller item. And the other thing I think we do need to discuss here is the sustainability staff position, which we've heard, from different people about. We saw we got a sort of a very rough draft of a possible job description. And that's another one I think tonight we have to hash out and take a vote on about whether or not to include after we've said whatever concluding comments we want to make, since we have talked about this a fair amount in the past. So any other, so we've got the police cruiser and Kate, yours is a larger question about allocating, staff resources to different committees and boards. So I think I would suggest that is a larger discussion that we need to have, but we're not going to be able to have it for this operating budget. So let's put that on our, we have talked about having a discussion about the committees and boards and how those function and what kind of resources they get. So that'll be a future discussion point. Are there other items that people want to discuss tonight?
No, I agree with you, Barney. The reason I brought that up, though, was because we are going to talk about the sustainability position, and I would like to talk about it either in the planning board or in the town hall budget and not in where it is currently, because I think that was one of the confusions that the FinCom expressed. I don't think they understand what that position is. And yes, I agree. I think the next step for us is to review this position, to discuss it, to approve it or not, and then to hire it. To get it in the budget and hire it. And in light of the fact that when we set our goals at the beginning of the year, we were very clear that sustainability was coming up to the top for us this year. We got the ESC committee up and running. We gave them a charge. They came back to us with that charge pretty well done. The work timeline, a work plan and a timeline. And they have again underscored the importance of having a position in town, as the master plan pointed out. And that that most, if not all, decisions made in town should be going forward looked at with a sustainability lens. And I don't think the job description was vague personally, but let's say it were. I don't want us to get into that chicken and egg thing where we end up doing nothing because, do we allocate the money and then figure out what the job is, or do we figure out the job is and then allocate the money? I think we decide whether we want that job or not, and then we go forward.
Yeah. And we know that, the way I think the discussion about how we would pay for it, that's clear. So it's not about the funding. It's about, is this a position that we as a board feel is an important role that we want to have in town hall under the authority of the town administrator to implement a lot of the things that are needed to be done in order to move the town to a more sustainable position. So who has something that they want to say about that? And I think at a certain point fairly soon, we should just put a motion on the floor and take a vote on whether to include it or not. But I'd like to let everyone who'd like to speak to it on the board, please to do so. David.
Yeah, so I agree with Kate. I mean, I think I generally agree with the comments we've heard about the importance of making a statement on the sustainability coordinator. I also agree with Nathan. I think we were pretty clear we don't want a second cruiser. I know the police every other year, every third year will advocate for a cruiser, and they'll come up with reasons why, but you can't do everything. And even though a cruiser is a one-time expense, and the sustainability is annual, they pretty much equal this year, and every third year they'll be equal. So I believe my personal feeling is we should put in the sustainability coordinator and remove the cruiser. That's sort of an apples and pears thing, but still, that would actually mean, I think, well, I'm not clear on the free cash use. If you put the 65K, if you effectively finance the sustainability coordinator by adding free cash, you're back to their 300K. I like the 235K. I think that's probably a good number. So I guess, Ryan, we'd have to run the math. Are we still under 3% if we put 65K more in the budget?
Well, if you take the 60 out for the cruiser.
Yeah, but that doesn't, well, yeah, I guess for the 1 year, I guess.
Basically, it's 5,000 more that you put into.
Yeah, so that's true. That's a fair statement. Right.
That's just a 1-year savings.
The 1 year
Right.
savings, it doesn't help you next year,
this
but that's
year.
okay. So gives you a year. So that's my personal feeling. Separately, in the more longer term, I'm okay with their plan. with those changes, I'm essentially okay with their plan. I think it does strike a good balance between making necessary investments in the town and just use of free cash. So it puts us, as Ryan's analysis shows, it puts us very close to the 12% floor. Now, the 12% floor is not a real floor, right? I mean, that's like a very high bar that we set for ourselves, but nevertheless, that's always been Carlisle's position, is to have a lot of reserves for a rainy day. So I do look downstream, and Ryan, it's in your thing, although not only the numbers are a little squishy, but I just want to point out that there are a fair number of capital requests that we shoved to the right, and there were some other ones in there already. So, for example, fiscal 25 is almost 1.7 million of capital requests. Now, half of that is a new engine 3, and I don't know where the threshold is where we might separately fund that, in a debt exclusion. That would do a long way to kind of knock that number down. So I just want to say I'm basically coached by FinCom. Things I said is where I stand on. I do have still a concern that we were well above the 12%, and now we're almost right down to the 12%, which is sort of okay for this year, but it doesn't give us a second act. And we know we have, things coming down the road. I don't have a sort of solution to that, other than if we get creative, like I just said, maybe the engine 3 is paid for through a debt exclusion next year, if that's what we really want. And I did notice, Ryan, in that model, that the auditorium lighting is still out. In a couple of years from now, that should be removed because it's already being done on a warrant. It's recommended to be done on a warrant article this year. So those are my comments. Thank you.
And I will say that we've talked about, Brian has certainly mentioned this a number of times, that long-term capital plan is something that's on the agenda for the summer, this coming, right, to really.
Right, but agenda or no agenda, I mean, the cash is the cash and the needs are the needs. I'm just saying, however we structure it, we got a bunch of stuff out there. And I think mentally what we should start thinking about, even in advance of summertime or whatever, is if we get ourselves basically down to the 12%, and if we agree that 12% is a number, a reserve number that we like to maintain, which is another discussion, but let's just say for now, that's where we are. That's certainly where I am. Then we don't have much dry powder. We can't just use more free cash. We're kind of getting a pass a little bit this year and making some adjustments and throwing a lot of, $1 million or $1.2 million of free cash. That's a lot of free cash use, right? Let's just be clear about that. So.
Well, plus we might even have to be doing more if we didn't have the ARPA funds.
Oh yeah, that's absolutely true. That's
right.
absolutely
So
true.
those ARPA funds aren't going to be there in the future. And so,
right.
I mean, I agree with everything that you just said, David, about the free cash and everything.
Yep. Okay. So thank you.
I have a couple of questions or comments or thoughts about the sustainability. I'll start with one and then end with the other. In the statements, my thing keeps coming up. I think I keep losing internet, so I may
your
just
voice is a little wobbly, but
yeah,
so
there's definitely something going on with this storm with my internet connection. So my first question, I guess, would be directed to Ryan, acknowledging that the ESC needs some help. And is there anybody whose hours could be increased to help them in the short term while working through the sustainability coordinator for perhaps next year when we're not in the situation that we're in right now with the budget? And I understand, and so don't say it. I understand, we hit the number we wanted, but it's all, it's a tough year for everybody. So if we can get this budget down further, I think we should try to. Is there anybody that we could add some hours to where we're not doing a full, because keep in mind that $65,000 does not include benefits. So this is a big add to our budget is there anybody who's currently employed that might be able to provide some support so that Debbie isn't spending all of her time doing the grant, the grant reporting and things like that, which she shouldn't have to be doing as a chair. I would completely agree with what Christina said earlier.
So if you're talking about just providing agenda, minute support and that type of item, then yes.
Grant reporting, reporting back on status of grants and things like that.
I would have to confirm with the employee, but yes. If you're just talking, this board needs support administratively, then that could be possible.
So here's my thought, and hear me out completely, please. I think, one is, Kate, I think you said, is it the job description first or the funding, or is it the funding and then the job description? I think that matters. I think it's important that we go forward with this with a very well planned out thing. I am in support of hiring a sustainability coordinator. I'm worried that the finance committee did not support it. If this fails at this town meeting because we tried to do something that wasn't completely ready and everybody wasn't on board, it's not going to happen again, right? Or it will be much harder to have happen. And so if there's a way we can pull some of the pain away from the committee that we charged, so that they can do other things and not be spending all their time doing really clerical things. And I don't mean it's really clerical, because you really need to know an awful lot about the grant and what's going on in order to be able to do it. But if we could do that, it may allow us to really get down to the nuts and bolts of, okay, exactly, the job description is great, but we'd be able to present, okay, this is exactly what the person is going to be doing. This is how they're going to be impacting the town. And we can have that ready for next spring, rather than risk having it fail this year. And then just be in even a worse situation. Plus, it allows us to get over this hump. And I think it sends, a good overall message that we're really worried about fiscal responsibility. My recommendation, or it's not a recommendation, my comment here does increase the budget. I'm going to acknowledge that, we would have to put more money into hours for whoever might be able to do this work. But I'm just trying to think outside of the box in a way that gets us to a good ultimate end. I don't want to be in a different spot than FinCom. And it's also interesting that, we're accepting everything FinCom is saying without talking to the departments, except this one thing. And I think optics is important. Again, I think sustainability is very important. I think the ESC is very important. I definitely want to give them some support in the short term, being 1 year, while we work all of this out with Debbie and her team, in having a really good presentation as to why we need this. And I'm not saying it's a presentation to town meeting, but if anybody asks us, I just feel like it's not completely there in a year that we have a very big spike in expenses. And so with that, I think I've proposed a potential short-term solution. And with that, I'll stop.
Nathan, just real quick, so this is to educate me. So you have the departments present to the finance committee and you have the departments present to the select board every year?
Yes.
Wow, that's a lot. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nathan, I think is a good short-term, you've, made an interesting proposal. But what I'm trying to point out is that the select board was given a draft concept paper about the position, and we have not discussed it. We have not read it and we have not discussed it. And that's on us.
Yeah, I don't set the agenda. I agree.
And it's not a vague draft. It's very, I actually attached it to the presentation for tonight so that I would review it. It's not vague, it's bulleted. It has all the, the things that need to be done. And I think that we should discuss this and make a decision and then go forward. Because these are all the things that I think the ESC are trying to do, but can't because they're not staff. And it's not just the administrative things that the ESC that's burning them out. It's also the, trying to get the staff boards and committees to coordinate, coordinate. How can a volunteer committee do that? It has to be staff on board to do that.
Yeah, that's the other thing I guess I would respond to, Nathan, is that if it's an existing town employee who's going to add, I don't know, 5 hours, 10 hours a week, and it's not someone who's had any, background in environmental studies, it's not an area of where the person has any professional training or education. It does end up being kind of a clerical position. And yes, you can have somebody, if you've received a grant like the Green Communities grant, a lot of work was done to get us up to date and to get us back on board as a green community. But to be able to determine what we should be asking for under the Green Communities program is not something that an administrative person would be able to do. And even with guidance from the committee, being able to write that and submit it requires more, specified education, more specific education and understanding, I think. And then there's just the whole broader area of grant possibilities that, again, I'm just not sure. I think we have very talented administrative staff, but for the kinds of things we're talking about in that job description, it requires more ability, more specialized knowledge. And so I would like to see this be funded as a staff position with a job description that really does outline the various skills needed and responsibilities, which I think we have a good start on in that concept paper. I also think I want to comment on the finance committee, and maybe since you attended it, Ryan, you would be comfortable speaking. I don't think, no, none of this FinCom are on, but my understanding is that it's not that they don't support this.
Scott is here.
Scott's on.
But they wanted, oh, he is? Okay, well, I could ask him in a second, but here's my understanding, and I think this is perfectly reasonable on the part of the finance committee, that their position is they want the select board to take a position on whether this is something that they support the town having as a staff position, that from the perspective of the elected leaders for the town, that this is a need that we believe should be filled now, and that their role is looking at how would you be able to fund this? How would you finance it? At which we've already determined. But that in the end, they didn't want to be in the position of recommending this. They wanted the select board to say, no, this is a position that we want, instructing them to figure out how to include it in the budget. And I think that's a reasonable position for them to take. I don't know if that's a fair characterization, Ryan, and if Scott wanted to comment and is on the call, it'd be great to have his voice.
There he is.
There he is. Hi, Scott.
I was hoping just to listen tonight, but seeing as I'm the sole person from FinCom here, I think very basically, I think at the heart of the reason we didn't include it in the budget was what you've talked about. We didn't feel like there was a clear job description. We knew of the concept document, but again, there are a lot of unanswered questions that typically we would need answers to as a town before we instituted a new position. So I think that was at the core of it. We understand that this is an important thing for the town. It really came down to not really understanding what is the exact job description, where does this report to, how is performance measured, those basic types of questions you would normally answer before filling a position were what we discussed. We did discuss, I will say, I would say there was general discussion support for if there was a way to fund this position. I know you're looking for a staff position ongoing, but if as a pilot program, if there was a way to either using one-time funds or ARPA funds to do, some members mentioned a consultant or an external contractor for some time to help start this work and define some of these things that are still not defined. That's something that would be an option, but that was the crux of our conversation.
Thank you, Scott.
I think that's very similar to, I think, to what I was just saying.
Yeah, that's,
You know, I really do understand the desire to have sort of a fully vetted job description and an understanding about you know, who the person would report to, et cetera. I do think that's been generally described. Kate's correct. We on the select board have not had a thorough discussion of that. I just want to point out, though, that last year in the budget, we included a new position of an assistant town administrator, and we included a new position of a town planner. And for the assistant town administrator, we did not have a fully fleshed out job description. We were, you know, discussing it pretty generally as someone that would handle human resources and personnel matters. And, you know, there was full support for that position, but just want to remind us that, again, I think it's, I mean, for me, it's the strategically, is this an important goal of that we believe our town should be pursuing, and that we have time to figure out a more detailed job description. I mean, that can be done, you know, in a month to 6 weeks before town meeting if we needed it. But frankly, I think folks at town meeting are going to be looking to us and to the FinCom for if we've put something in the operating budget, you know, why we've done that. And generally, I think they're going to be supportive of what we, if we've thought it through, what we're recommending as a budget. Travis, you've not said much through all of this. What's your comment?
Sure. Well, I tend to, I've watched this discussion, and I launched into this discussion, I think, one of the first budget discussions as to my kind of initial reaction. And I'm glad we've kind of kept it in there to evaluate it. And I like Nathan's approach, and, you know, the thought that this is a process and we should kind of figure out a way to, you know, ease into it. I kind of step back and think about, you know, again, the master plan, and, you know, we have 5 kind of key goals or key initiatives. Environmental stewardship is certainly one of them. And I completely buy into that. It's one of the reasons I love Carlisle so much, is the, you know, environment that we're in here. And so part of that environmental stewardship is obviously, you know, sustainability. And there are lots of components of that. And I think that, you know, Barney, most recently you've set this up as, do we support that goal? And I think that there are multiple ways you could support the goal of sustainability without necessarily this coordinator position, you know, as the litmus test for that. And you know, frankly, I'm on the Municipal Facilities Committee. I mentioned this before, that, you know, we as a committee had made a decision relative to the library to spend more on a particular replacement item because it was environmentally friendly and was more sustainable long-term. And it cost, and it was initially more expensive up front. And our committee discussed it, and we thought that that was in keeping with what Carlisle generally wants. I don't think that, you know, we had a separate position to help us evaluate that. But I think generally sustainability is getting more infused in our whole culture here, not only in Carlisle, but throughout the United States. And we realize that this is how we have to be responsible for these things, these externalities that we haven't paid for. And so I mean, I'm not convinced that this is the right approach, because I think, again, on the Municipal Facility Committee, as an example, we continue to have escalating costs that go up over time. We've had the Wilkins, HVAC unit, which is now potentially double what we'd initially budgeted. David pointed out our capital needs going forward. And Barney, you started by saying, well, we can pay for this. And yes, Carlisle's fortunate. We can pay for it if we want, but I think that money comes from somewhere, and it's coming from our future. We're going to have not only $1.6 million next year of additional, or not additional, but of increased cost. You look over the future with the capital needs, and you've got 900,000 when we're only at 480 some thousand. I don't have it in front of me, but things are increasing, and we're just, I just can't. I'm trying to limit kind of this growth, and we set our targets as a select board of what we thought was appropriate growth, and we're already saying, well, we can kind of dip into it here and there. And I mean, you got to take this all in totality. So I'm having a hard time thinking, and I guess I'm all over the map here, but my final point would be that if we're going to spend that money, and I think that I'd rather spend it on something that was sustainable, that helped immediately. And I know that's different than a coordinator who could help on multiple fronts, but there's a limited amount of resources, or what people are willing to spend. And I can't see this. And I don't think that this position has been vetted fully enough to really know what that person is going to do and how that's going to impact our town. So that's what I wanted to say.
All right. Does anyone have anything new that hasn't been said already that they want to add? Well, I think we should take a vote on this if people are comfortable. And what I'm hearing is, I didn't hear anyone sort of comment on Scott's suggestion about, a consultant. So what I'm going to say is, I'm hearing two possibilities. One is that we decide to add additional money into the town hall budget that is specifically for adding hours to an existing position in order to be able to provide time on sustainability efforts, particularly support for this committee. That's one option. And then the other is to vote to include the sustainability position in the FY24 budget at the $65,000 figure.
Well, I guess after what Scott said, I would modify, my comment about adding hours to also add some funds for, I don't know where, how we get that number, but some funds for consulting help for the ESC, so that we can get through this year and really map this out properly.
In addition to the staff time?
Yep, because the staff time's going to be clerical and grant work and whatever Debbie needs. The other person is going to help with the other things.
And Kate, you want to comment?
I was going to say, I was going to disagree with your two options there, because I did, from what I had heard from Nathan, I did hear support for the consultancy. And I also would be in support of consultancy at the, if we don't have a full position, at least we absolutely need a consultant.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, why don't we propose a half a loaf and fund 30K and let Ryan and the sustainability committee sort out staff time and a consultant, and give them half the amount and a year to sort it out and come back with a cleaner recommendation.
You're going to get them a half a cruiser too, right?
No, I'm not giving them a half. My opinion is no half.
We've done that in the past, Travis. We really have.
We did, we gave them 2.5, they had, yeah. We
They
gave
could have
them
a bicycle. Maybe they could use a second one.
3 over 2 years, so they had 1.5 each year.
Okay, so
I also, by the way, I also absolutely insist that this goes in either town hall or planning budget, not in the ESC budget.
yeah,
I think that was Ryan's assumption, right, Ryan?
I think it goes in town hall.
right, into town hall. All right, so what I'm hearing is a proposal to put $30,000 into the town hall budget for the purpose of providing both administrative support and consultant support for the next year. Is that fair?
Yeah, I
Right.
think that's close to a motion I would make, but I would say, what
I
that.
want to
mix
make the
is-
motion,
what
please.
that- Oh, I was just gonna say, so moved.
Oh, yeah, I knew you were. So I'm putting you on the hot seat.
Yeah,
Again, first of all, this is not a lack of support for the committee. I think that this is all about supporting the committee and making sure that in the end, we get really the right thing. So I propose that we request Ryan to add the amount of $30,000 to the town hall budget for the purpose of providing support to the Environmental Sustainability Committee through adding hours and or consulting.
second.
Okay, any discussion on the motion?
I just had a question. If we do vote for this, how do we know at the end of the day it's effective?
Guess we would be voting in
Better
favor of
next year.
sustainability commitment coordinator.
Next year, yeah.
Well, it's also, Travis, I think it'll be incumbent on, frankly, on Brian, our town administrator, and the committee to be reporting back on what's been done.
Yeah, I mean, if next year we're sitting here and we're wondering what happened with that $30,000, I think we're probably not going to support more money, right? Or that money again. So I think it's really going to be incumbent on a lot of communication and hearing, and a really good plan going forward. I'm not saying they don't have a good plan going forward, but really fleshing out that job description, what it's doing. Before we vote, I was wondering, would it be appropriate to ask Debbie what she thinks?
Yes, sure. Debbie, do you have a comment on this proposal?
Need any help I can get. So I feel that this is a move forward that would help the committee. I think we'll still need help in addition to the $30,000 from other committees and staff, because it's, we have to change mindset, policy and stuff like that. So I wasn't prepared to answer this question, so.
I was just asking, as the chair of the committee we're talking about,
Yeah, I know.
you're directly
I'm getting
directly
ready for the
involved in this
next
discussion.
presentation. Yeah, and I mean, I think that we desperately need assistance. It's the amount of work we have to do, we're still playing catch up, is phenomenal. So I'm not going to say no to anything at this point. So,
Okay, thank you, Debbie. All right, are we ready to vote? All right, let's do that then. We have a
So
motion.
are we,
Right.
what are we voting? I made the motion, but
Yeah, we're voting
do
on
we
the
need to actually make a
motion.
motion in order to ask Ryan to add something to the budget?
We just made.
Yeah,
the
we're
mo-
trying to
you made the
finalize
motion.
the budget. I think it's appropriate.
$30,000 to the budget, and Kate seconded it.
I seconded it.
Yeah, so I think we're ready to go ahead and take a vote on this. So again, this will be a roll call vote. All those in favor of the motion? Arnold, I.
Brown eye.
What do I?
Reed, I.
Snell, aye.
Okay, thank you very much. So Ryan, you're charged with or Scott can, communicating that back to the FinCom. And then I think we should also, as a board, take a vote on the police cruiser. So that we, if we want to instruct the FinCom to remove that, then that could be a motion.
Would it be okay for us to ask Scott, make them decide in that discussion to add it? Just because he's here and
Scott, aren't you glad you decided to attend early?
Yes. But what was the request, Nathan?
I think initially we were all talking about taking the police cruiser out. It was reported earlier that you decided to put it back in based upon a presentation by the police chief. Just wondering if you could just tell us what made you decide that.
I mean, really what it came down to, and it was just Victor. The police chief wasn't presenting, but he was just presenting the the fleet, the miles per vehicle, the patrol miles, essentially, according to the way the police department does its patrols and the limits on mileage, you're due to have 2 vehicles replaced this year. And so we can replace one. If you don't replace one this year, you'll probably be replacing 2 next year, unless there's some change to how the police department does patrols and reduces mileage based on the current vehicles. So I think our feeling was that it's kicking a can down the line if you don't replace 2, and you'll probably be in a position next year where there's 2 to replace, lacking any substantive change to how the police cruisers are used.
Right, but that last piece, Scott, I mean, we got a new chief. The new chief will come on board, hopefully, and that's one. And secondly, we got a sustainability initiative, and somebody sooner or later has got to take a look at the town vehicles and whether they have to go green in some other way. So I think prudence is wise even without the budget.
I think
Anybody else
that's
know what
helpful
the
feedback to
compromise
have.
is?
I think our assumption was that given those variables, it was not likely that those changes would happen, but it sounds like there might be more support for those changes. So, I mean, I'm happy to just communicate that back to FinCom. We're going to be meeting on the 20th to take another pass, probably the final pass on the budget.
So let's, as a board, would someone like to make a motion to take one of the 2 police cruisers out of the current operating budget?
I'll try, and then if people don't like my motion, somebody else makes a motion. My motion would be that the select board ask the FinCom to reevaluate the need, the adding of 2 police cruisers into this year's operating budget.
To reevaluate? Is that what you said?
I'll second that.
Well, my comment on that is what maybe we need to give some direction then about what additional information is needed to reevaluate.
I'd say, worst case impact, let's say one car, gives up altogether. How's that going to impact us?
All right, so maybe
That could happen with anything. That could anyway happen with anything, Kate.
Well,
A dump truck could peel, that stuff happens. That's not a good budgeting mechanism. We've got extra money in reserve for those purposes.
well,
I mean,
that's
worst case if we
that's in fact why I'm kind of not anxious to give them a second one right off the bat.
So, yeah,
Right.
so.
so
I think that the reason that we would give them and the direction we would give them is.
Sorry, Nathan, you lost the part of that. Say it again.
I think it's what we just talked about would be the reason. It's, we have hopefully a new chief coming on board. We definitely have a sustainability thing. This is not a hybrid cruiser. And we have so many things pushing it 1 year out. I think the evaluation is pushing it 1 year out really going to cause a problem for us, or is it just pushing it out 1 more year and it gives the police chief time to work with other committees and figure out what's going on with the current fleet and come to us with going forward.
That was actually what I was trying to get at with the worst case scenario. Yes.
Yeah. Okay, I'm comfortable with that. Travis?
So we're not saying no right now. We're just saying,
Right,
take
we
another
want
look.
to take another look at it in light of the relevant information, yeah.
Or the vote is, let's ask the police chief to come in and explain it.
Right,
That's kind of what I was going to suggest, is that I haven't been through this budgeting process on the select board before, but I do feel like when you dip down into these individual budgets and we just make these kind of blanket decisions, oh, they need a bucket truck, they don't, or whatever, I haven't gone deep enough to know and to vet that to make a better judgment than some of the groups that have already brought that before us and think that. So I think you're right, Nathan. We need, if we're going to do that, I think we should get more information. That's kind of what I think.
Right. So rather than putting on FinCom, I'll make a motion. Let's ask the police chief to come in and talk about his fleet.
at our select board meeting.
Yep.
Okay, but where does that leave? What's our timeline? Is that okay? We have time for that, I guess, in 2 weeks?
We could potentially do it next week,
Yeah.
right?
We
Okay.
could add it to next week if we're, right,
Yeah.
if we're
Okay.
gonna meet next week.
Yeah.
But yeah, do it on the
I'll second
28th
that.
and still be able to complete the budget as, in a timely fashion.
Yeah, here again, it's, this overlap of responsibility gets a little tricky, because there's the FinCom, there's us, and the FinCom now has this, we used to have a long-term caps committee, remember, when we've kind of now swept that out, and it's this committee of the FinCom. And in certain respects, we need to be relying on their recommendations, not questioning. It's not that we shouldn't question, but anyway, yes, I think we should, in this case, hear this one, but I would have also been happy to just ask the FinCom to really evaluate and be sure, because we have questions about it. So
Why don't we do both?
Yeah,
Ask them
because I was
to take
just going to
another
look.
at it at their meeting on Monday, and then give us some input before our meeting on the 28th, and we can determine if we would like to have Chief Fong come in and discuss it with us directly. Does that sound good?
That's fine.
Yep.
Okay.
So they meet on the 20th. If we meet on the 22nd, then we would talk about whether or not we wanted to ask him to come in.
Yeah.
Or if we couldn't do it in time, if the timing didn't work, we could do it on the 28th, our select board meeting on the 28th.
Yeah, no, I was saying that we would just be deciding whether or not to bring them in on the 21st or 22nd.
Oh, gotcha.
On the
Yeah.
28th.
Okay. So our motion, Nathan, is to.
I don't remember.
Okay, well, the motion is does somebody else want to put it on the floor, or shall I try to, and somebody can say so moved? Our motion, as I understand it, is to ask the FinCom to take another look at the police cruiser in light of, ask the FinCom to reevaluate the second police cruiser, and for the select board to consider having the police chief come in to speak to us about it.
Okay, so moved.
May I have a second?
Sure, I'll second that.
Any discussion?
Didn't we already have a motion on the floor? Did we rescind that one?
Nathan, rescind your motion. I'll rescind the
I
second.
rescind my first motion.
Okay, so this second motion here is kind of unclear to me. I do kind of, I don't want to beat this to death, but I do generally support letting, like we talked about with with the selection committee an hour ago.
Police chief.
I like giving people a charge and letting them do their job. So I like it that I like telling FinCom to go back and wire brush it a little more. I'm not so comfortable with the way it's phrased, like, okay, do that, but then we might bring the chief in. Really, we should just tell the FinCom, go back and look at it hard one more time and come back. I would be more comfortable with that. I'll vote in favor of the motion as written if others feel that way, but I don't like it. I think we're sort of undercutting FinCom, and I'm fine giving them further instructions. I'm not so fine giving a parallel path to the, and I do believe, getting the advocacy of, I like Chief Fong. I think he's done a great job stepping in, but he won't be the chief next year. And again, I think, the charge back to FinCom is, hey, just think about it. There's going to be a new regime and let them take a fresh look.
So would you like to make a friendly amendment to the motion?
I don't know. Not if there's not support.
I would say I rescind my motion and
Not if there's not support around the table.
I rescind my
there is,
motion
David.
There is.
and so moved on what Dave Modell just said. Or second.
It sounds like we're back to the original motion.
Yes, it does.
Yeah.
So the motion is to ask the FinCom to reevaluate the second police cruiser, to take a hard look at it and report back.
Yep.
Exactly.
I'll second that.
All right, who's so moved?
Nathan moved it, right?
Nathan moved it, I seconded it.
Okay, thank you very much. Any
And
discussion?
Kate was advocacy.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's do a roll call vote on this motion, please. Arnold, I.
Brown eye.
Modell, aye.
Reed, aye.
Snell, aye.
All
Okay.
right. Thank you very much. And Scott, thank you for taking this message back to the FinCom, and we look forward to hearing back from you. Finally, I know we're running over a little bit on time for this item, but we received a memo from Scott on behalf of the ARPA committee. And I think tonight we don't have to, what we should do, I think tonight is very briefly look at the 3 scenarios that were provided in that memo. It's basically sort of, do we want to, they were basically options about what the reserve would be, and based on what the reserve was, how we would proceed. So one scenario was we set the reserve at 150,000, and that would allow for funds to be available. Thank you, Ryan, for doing some of the projects that were done this past winter around heating support and mental health support, rental assistance. The second was a $300,000 reserve, and the third scenario was a $470,000 reserve. Now, we've already got some ARPA funded items that have been, I think we've all agreed to, that are in the FY24 budget being funded by ARPA. And so
Those are already rolled into the 470, Barney.
correct.
The 470 after those.
That's right. After those have been taken out, and there's a number of other things that are still on the list for capital expenses this year that could potentially be funded through ARPA funds. I don't think we need to or can't, I don't think we have the time or not prepared to make those decisions tonight. I don't know if we want to give sort of a general comment about the feeling about the reserve, or just postpone or save this and have a more in-depth discussion about it on the 28th. Any comments on that?
I think you should let Scott run through this for you to make sure that everybody on the select board understands what, I mean, unless you think you really already understand it from the memo, understands what those 3 menu items are.
And do that tonight?
Yeah, I think you should at least do that tonight.
Okay. Other thoughts from the board? Are we okay with that?
I agree.
Okay, let's go ahead. And then Scott, I know I'm not trying to make you race, but if you could, I know you're usually very concise in any case. Thanks so much for reviewing this with us.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think very simply, the question is, among the items that are currently capital items and articles listed that would appear in the warrant, do you want to use ARPA funds to fund any of those? And essentially what you would be doing is, assuming we're using ARPA for the elevator and wastewater treatment at the school, that leaves a balance of $470,000 in ARPA funds available to be committed through the end of December 2024. There are other items in the capital items warrant in the articles that you could apply ARPA funds to. That would reduce the amount available for the remainder of the ARPA term. And likely the benefit would be you would probably in those cases not use free cash. So your free cash balance would go up. So it's kind of a philosophical question that started, I think, the last time with, I think it's good to keep ARPA funds in reserve so that if we do have things that come up, if we fund one police cruiser, for example, and we realize we do need another police cruiser, ARPA funds are a mechanism to fund these one-time items off of the normal essential items off of the normal schedule of town meeting. On the other hand, if people want to use ARPA funds now, I know there's some concern about running the clock out on ARPA funds, which I'm not that concerned about. But if folks wanted to use additional ARPA funds for some of the capital items currently funded through free cash, we could do that. And our recommendation as a committee is we could apply up to another 320,000 in ARPA funds. We would like to keep the 150 in reserve for future use for things that we've done in the past, like rental assistance and some other opportunities outside of the normal budget process. So I think that's the question the select board needs to consider.
Thank you, Scott. David, did you have a question? or comment?
Yeah, I do. So Scott, I follow that logic completely. My question is, in your memo, I get, plan A where you have the 150 and you list some bare bones things that you'll spend the 150 on. In the plan B, which would leave 300, you have about 600K of stuff in that list. And
Well,
then-
that's just stuff those are the types of projects that have been funded to date with ARPA funds.
Oh, these have been, okay, so that's the difference. We've
Those are
already
just-
spent, I see what you're saying.
Those are examples of what I would
Ah.
consider capital expenses
Yeah,
or
I get it. Okay.
essential items that
Yeah.
you've been able to
Okay,
move forward.
Okay, no, I understand. I thought that was coming up kind of stuff. So basically what you're saying is, you want to at least keep of the 470, you want to keep 150 at least. So that leaves, whatever, 300K of, what to do with the level of 300K. And you're saying we could either spend, half of it, all of it, or none of it, right? Those are kind of the choices.
For the current items in the FY24 budget, yeah.
Oh, for 24, I see, okay.
Yeah, this is really just about, do we want to take any items that are currently funded with free cash in the
I see.
capital items or the articles and instead
Yeah.
fund it through ARPA?
Right,
Yeah.
okay. And you had the discussion, we didn't speak about this directly but it was in the notes that Ryan had. The Corey Auditorium, I guess some decision was made that should be a warrant article and funded through free cash. Do you want to?
So David, with respect, Scott can only speak to what's in the memo. He cannot deliberate.
Well, I'm not asking for deliberation. I'm asking
Yeah.
for a recounting of whatever historically happened in meetings I was not present in. So,
And Jim O'Shea is on the line. The school committee discussed the article,
okay.
but they didn't take a formal, I don't recall if they took a formal position on the warrant. I think they expressed support, but I don't know that it was a formal vote.
But maybe you can just speak before Jim does, or Kate, did ARPA consider in its own committee using ARPA for that auditorium lighting?
No, we have not had a discussion about that yet.
All right, thank you.
I thought we actually said last time that we wouldn't use ARPA for that because it was such a big amount.
I thought the discussion was you might use ARPA for some portion of it.
Let it.
Yes, you're right.
So that went away. That discussion wasn't had, I guess. And Jim, if you have.
No,
Jim
Well, and I
O'Shea.
think it's part of it's waiting to see what's happening with that warrant and the amount.
So how what about saying half that warrant would be ARPA and not use the full 300K, but go ahead and do the elevator and the wastewater treatment plant and half of the lighting just to reduce the impact on free cash, but leave a good chunk left in ARPA. Is there any concern about not being able to spend that amount?
So I'm going to be that guy again, but the select board can discuss that, but not Kate and Scott.
And I think this is, I would rather we gave this more time at a subsequent agenda subsequent meeting, because there's a lot I think we need to look at here. And I just don't think we're prepared tonight to make a decision. I think we can give a general, we can see where we stand on the general notion of at least holding aside 150,000, which there was general support the last time we discussed this for the 100,000. And then if you recall, we agreed that we would ask the ARPA committee for their recommendation about the reserve level they wanted. So I think what we're hearing is that their minimum reserve would be 150,000. And if we could agree about that, if we're in agreement about that, then I'm happy to hear briefly from Jim on the auditorium lighting, but I think we should have a full discussion about this at our next agenda and next meeting.
And I was just going to chime in, Barney. The school committee is having a meeting on the 21st, having a special meeting to discuss the auditorium lighting and
Okay.
the internal cameras that were also on the capital planning. So they wanted to give the community the opportunity to weigh in on that. So that's the plan. They'll be meeting on the 21st again,
Okay.
and then they'll be taking a more formal position on that.
And so we'll have that information then shortly thereafter, and we can then include this in on our agenda for the 28th.
Yeah, but it sounds like, yes, that's true, but I think it seems like we've got to give some direct, I agree, understand what Ryan's saying. We should not be asking the ARPA committee to deliberate tonight, but we can give the ARPA committee direction and they can figure out when they can deliberate. So it probably is useful at this moment to give, again, in the column ABC way, we understand 150 of the 470 is the amount that ARPA recommends we keep as dry powder. So let's accept that. That leaves 300K-ish. And again, as I said, I think the options are use half of it now, use none of it now, or use all of it now. We ought to probably give them some direction so they can deliberate amongst themselves and come back with their recommendation.
And that 300K-ish is after the elevator and the.
I believe that's true,
treatment plant?
right, Scott?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that presumes that approximately 200,000 are already being used for the elevator and the wastewater treatment HVAC unit.
My preference would be to keep more in ARPA than the 150 minimum. Maybe not the whole thing, maybe spend another 100,000 on something. Maybe Scott's just tired of coming to us with ARPA meeting things. But I think, having those funds there to be able to do something that may come up, I think is incredibly valuable.
I agree. I'd be comfortable with spending up to half of it, 150 of it. Similar to what Nathan
Well,
said.
maybe I'd put it the other way and say, what do we think? What do we want to agree the reserve amount would be? So, because it sounds like, what Nathan's suggesting is we increase the reserve amount. And and whatever that increase is, the rest of it would be available. And we would like the ARPA committee to give us a recommendation about how they would spend what capital items could be covered by the remaining ARPA funds.
Sure.
And does that make sense, Nathan?
Well, I thought that these things were already kind of factored into what we were spending in reserve. And the question was, did we want to reduce the amount we were spending there and move it over to ARPA? Right.
Yeah, no, right. But I mean, you guys are saying the same thing, right? What we're saying is give them guidance on the level of reserve and then come up with a plan to spend what's left over after we give them that guidance, right? And presumably it's taking out items that we would have used free cash to spend and using ARPA money.
I just think it's, not to beat a dead horse, but I think it's easier for us to ask the ARPA committee to take a look at how much we're spending in ARPA than it is to ask them to figure out what the reserve would be and how we're doing ARPA.
No, we're giving them, I mean, I guess maybe we're not communicating. As
I would
Barney
just
said,
say they could spend up to an additional 100, 150,000
okay,
more.
right.
That would
I'll
be
say
my
it's right.
recommendation.
That's the same thing, right? The same
Yep.
thing. Just we're going in circles with Barney, so I agree.
All right, so, so the proposal is to, ask the ARPA committee, to provide a list of what, if they had $150,000, what they would recommend it be spent on out of the operating, out of the, capital budget warrant items. Yeah. Or capital budget or warrant items, correct?
I mean, that's fine with me. Is Nathan okay with 150? I guess is the question.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay,
Yeah.
and Travis, were you comfortable with that?
I would, there's one other item, and I know Jim's here, but I know like in the case of Wilkins, we had approved 187,000 in ARPA funds, and I know we're still working to get an estimate on what that project will cost. And obviously, if it's significantly over that amount, you would probably need to find other funding options in addition to or instead of the ARPA funds. So I'm not too concerned about unexpended funds across the projects, but in the case of the Wilkins HVAC, there may be an issue there with that project if it is substantially different than what was approved. And Jim, I don't know if there's any last minute updates on that, but that's something we can look at in the next, week to 2 weeks.
No, not as of today. We don't have any updates.
So Scott, that's something you already set aside the 187 from ARPA.
Well, we had already approved that in June, so that's
Right, so
obviously,
That's not counting against the 470s. What you're
that's
saying.
correct, right?
But if it's over, then it would.
Yeah, so say if it came in at 300, you would have the decision of, do you add
Right,
another
yeah, yeah.
100,000 in ARPA funds, or do you wait for town meeting and you potentially rescind the ARPA funds and use a different funding mechanism?
So would you know enough about that in time for our meeting on the 28th? Because that could be part of this whole
Yeah.
analysis, right? I mean, it would be good. I would rather personally that we don't drag it much. March 28th is getting kind of late. It'd be nice to have a final position on
Yeah.
these things by then. So
Yeah, Jim, do you have any sense of timeline on that?
There is a possibility that we could, right? They're looking at different estimates on what the project could be and changing components of the project, but then there is the bid process. Like once we have the estimates, then we do have to go out to bid and see what the bids come in at. So, but probably by the 28th, we will have a better grasp of where we sit, whether it's something in that 230 range, or if it's greater than that, it will be problematic, as you said.
Yeah, I mean, going from 187 to 300 that's a whole new request, right?
Yeah,
That's
it might be
So-
cost prohibitive at that point in time.
So there's the potential that 187 would go back into the ARPA balance if we can't fund the project through ARPA. So I don't know what we do with that information because it's incomplete, but
it could just be something has to go on next year's town warrant.
yeah.
Okay, well, we'll cross that bridge when we get to it, right? Or when we know some more, hopefully in a couple of weeks. Do we need to take a vote on this 150 to ARPA? No, we can just make that our direction to the ARPA committee. All right, everyone, that's good. All right, have we concluded for now our budget discussion and able to move on to the town meeting warrant? All right, let's move ahead then. So
I just have to run real quick. Let my dog.
okay. Brian, would you put up the, let's see, well, we know we have a briefing that you're going to offer about the senior property tax exemption, and which is one of the warrant items. And then Debbie is on the phone, on the Zoom call to make a brief presentation about the stretch code, the opt-in legislation. So maybe since Debbie's stayed with us for this long, we should let her go first, Ryan, and then we can come back to the property tax exemption, and then we can take a quick review through the other warrants to see if there are any of them that we would like to have someone speak to at our next meeting. That make sense?
Fine, she can go first.
Okay, and Debbie's, I believe you've got a couple of slides. If you want to share the host duties, then Debbie could put that up.
Done.
Okay. It's a different system from what I normally see. Hopefully this will. There, okay. Hopefully this is, you can see this? Can you?
Your
See your home screen.
home screen. We're seeing your home screen. Oh, there we go.
All right. Okay, it was just, yes, you were seeing my work screen because I'm using two screens for work. Okay, I will try and run this from the beginning. Thank you very much for all your support and in this with our committee. Glenn Reed is also here from the committee who will to help answer any questions that you have. I don't know why it's not running from the beginning. That here we go. There we go. And
Debbie, put it in presentation mode. Yeah, thank you.
got it there.
Yep.
Thank you. This is a very quick introduction or overview of the new the opt-in specialized stretch code. The new building code is based off a 30-year-old proven design methodology that results in net zero energy buildings called Passive House. Passive House applies to any type of building, not just houses. It actually comes out of Austria. The new Massachusetts building code is not quite as strict as Passive House, but it has a little twist because it's really promoting the electrification of buildings over fossil fuel use. The new buildings will be airtight, but they do have openable windows. They are well insulated. They have heat and energy recovery systems. All new buildings will be EV ready and PV, that's photovoltaic ready, which means you have to provide the infrastructure and the orientation of the building and the conduit for all these future electrification uses. The code has 3 levels: base, stretch, and opt-in specialized stretch code. And the same issues are actually covered in every single one of these levels. There is a step up between the base and the stretch code. Carlisle is already on the stretch code because we're a green community. And the opt-in specialized code is really as the icing on the cake rather than being yet another big step. Okay. The opt-in specialized code fulfills the aspirations of the 2021 climate bill and the Massachusetts decarbonization roadmap for 2050 by ensuring that any new building and major refurbishments, even if it uses fossil fuel, is pre-wired for electrification, therefore eliminating the need for later retrofits. The opt-in specialized code has to be voted into town meeting and is enacted a minimum of 6 months after the vote on either the 1st of January or the 1st of July. So you can't bring it in on the 30th of November. As I mentioned, Carlisle's already on the stretch code, and the stretch code is going to be implemented in 3 steps. We're already in the 2023 residential code, which demands slightly more efficient homes. Hers is the energy rating system for homes, and the lower the number, the more energy efficient it is. In July, the new commercial stretch code comes into effect, and then a whole year later, the next tier of the stretch code comes in. If the town votes for the opt-in specialized stretch code in May, we would advance to the new July stretch code in January 1st, 2024, 6 months before other green communities who have not voted for this. We wouldn't be the only community. I mean, it's expected that Concord and Lexington around us will vote for it. I'm not too sure about any of the other towns at the moment, but that's just because I haven't caught up with them. So what does this mean? What does the specialized stretch code mean? There are 3 routes. Well, in fact, they split the options into houses under 399 square feet. And there are 3 routes you can comply with the specialized the specialized code. You can have an all-electric house, which is exactly the same as the July 2024 stretch code. There's no extra requirements. But if you have fossil fuel, you have to pre-wire your house for future electrification and install photovoltaics on the roof. Or you can have a passive house, and as I say, that's a higher level of air tightness. It also has different implications to do with window locations, but passive houses can have fossil fuels or wood burning stoves. If your house is larger than 4,000 square feet, you cannot construct a fossil fuel house. That's just gone. You can, unless you have it as a passive house, but you have not got that middle option has disappeared. Massachusetts is really trying to encourage electrification of buildings and are providing a lot of incentives for the electrified house or the passive house. Sorry. What does this mean for Carlisle? Well, we have large building lots and our houses are larger than on average on 4,000 square feet. Our current average HERS rating is for a new build house is 51, which matches the state average. But however, if you look at the graph, the bottom graph, you will see that we're actually not, the more recent houses have not been as energy efficient as in the past. So currently in Carlisle, and this was a sort of back of the envelope discussion with Madeline, we think there's about 22 sites that are ready for development now. I am concerned that the developers haven't improved their HERS rating and that we have a lot of sites available. And I think that's why the whole committee feels that we really need to act fast on adopting this code. Apart from Woodward Village, which is the now house development, all of our new homes have been built using propane or gas. And there's still the most recent house on the, I've got the wrong name there. The Valentine Farm sites has propane. So nothing is changing. The developers aren't moving on yet. What does the specialized code mean for Carlisle when it comes to the commercial code? Well, the principles are exactly the same. You know, they want to promote all electric commercial buildings. And so if you have a fossil fuel commercial building, it has to be pre-wired. Now, I gave it in the handout. It's much more, commercial code is more complex because you have so many different types of use of building. But relatively speaking, Carlisle, we'll probably have few new commercial or municipal buildings. So many of the complexities that are in the handout won't even arise here or shouldn't arise here. And I would just want to point out, we can have passive house. You can still have fossil fuel in a passive house, fire station or a police station, because that still complies. If we ever built new multifamily housing, they would now have to be to passive house standards. It steps up again over the years, but I think, you know, we aren't going to be doing that in the near future. And just to make things more confusing, passive house has an American version, which is called FIAS, and under the code, we can use both passive house and FIAS. So it's okay. It's one of those quirky things we have in the industry. So what are the upsides for the opt-in specialized code? Well, number one, it's the easiest way for Carlisle to reduce its carbon footprint. It complies with several master plan goals. It actually encourages even healthier all electric buildings, as fossil fuels emit toxic gas as well as carbon. We would move on to adopting the stretch code 6 months earlier. And the passive house design route allows for the use of fossil fuel source. And this was actually a discussion in our committee because we were concerned about power outages in winter. The all electric houses generally are a bit harder to have a generator to work in with a generator in winter. On the downside, energy bills, if you don't design the building well, the energy bills, because of electricity being higher in cost, might be higher. You obviously have restricted the fuel choice for larger houses. And because you need to model passive house, there's a tiny, you have an extra consultant. But the overall cost for the whole building isn't that large. And I had a email discussion with Chief Sorrows about the fire station, because that is, I think, the building that would maybe be the one that would be impacted first in Carlisle, and everything else is a bit up in the air. And it turns out that zero energy fire stations are being built in Massachusetts already. If you design it from net zero, you can control costs. You design it as a passive house or a net zero fire station. And passive house fire stations have been built in North America. So this is a proven route for public safety buildings. So just finally, Massachusetts is required to reduce its carbon emissions by 50% by 2030 from the 1990 baseline, and eliminating fossil fuels from new and extensively refurbished buildings with adopting the specialized stretch code is essential to reach that goal. And that's the shortest presentation I've ever given on this subject, so I hope you understood it all.
Thank you, Debbie. And tonight we can ask questions. We are not, as a board, going to try to vote on this one way or the other in terms of it being on the warrant. We'll do that at our last meeting in March. But any questions for Debbie? Nathan?
You're muted.
There we go. Thanks for that, Debbie. So could you describe a little bit more, so if somebody's building an all electric house, what is the issue about having a generator? We have above ground power lines everywhere. What prevents somebody from putting a generator to be able to power their house in the event of a power failure?
They can put a generator in. It just the others on the committee just mentioned it. Well, we were trying to find negatives, and it is harder to have a generator power. You can't, for instance, the generator won't power the heat pumps in a power outage. That was the concern.
Is that just the size of the generator problem, or is there a physical issue? Is there a different issue, a technical issue with that?
Glenn, are you able to answer this better than I can?
Hi. I think you're basically correct. A heat pump requires greater wattage than the circulating pumps and the ignition for a furnace or boiler. We didn't research this in detail. I think it may be the case, depending upon your heat pump system and size, that you could size a generator large enough. But the overall point being, if you were looking for generator backup, it would either be difficult or more expensive than with a fossil fuel heated home.
Okay. So it's more expensive.
If you're considering a generator backup, putting that aside, most analyses show that an all-electric home, all other things being equal, is a less expensive first cost than a fossil fuel heated home, because you don't have to have a redundant heating and cooling system. The heat pump does both.
So, okay, so my next question is, you know, we're always juggling with balances, right? And so if this were to be and I have just one other question after this, but if this was to be enacted, what is the cost implications for a home to be built?
Are you, sorry, Glenn,
you
you go
would-
ahead.
Yeah. In again, all other things being equal in terms of your size of the home, the thermal envelope, an air source, and I'll make a distinction here. An air source heat pump system is typically less expensive than putting in both central air conditioner and a furnace or boiler, because effectively a heat pump is a central air conditioner that can also just run backwards. So you don't have to also install a fossil fuel heating system. You don't have to pipe the house for gas. You don't have to bring gas in from the street. You do have to upgrade your electrical panel, and there may be slightly higher costs for an induction cooktop if you go that route, though there are less expensive electric cooktop options that are comparable to gas. So from a first cost perspective, and again, assuming you're using air source heat pump, ground source heat pumps can be more expensive. The first cost for an electric home is typically less than for a fossil fuel heated home. As Debbie mentioned, operating costs can be higher depending what fuel you're looking at. Against propane, electric pretty much wins the race every time. Against natural gas, not so much. But because you're already functioning in a low load home, because these homes start as just very energy efficient, the differential in operating cost in a new home is not that large. And from a life cycle cost perspective, you know, if you put all the numbers in and figure out your mortgage costs and your long-term fuel cost, electric wins against propane, typically wins against gas. So there it depends somewhat on your assumptions. Right now we're in a high electric cost period, but the thought is that our current electric costs are a little bit more of an anomaly than a long-term trend. And I'll also add, if you go the PV route, that's pretty much a hands down win against fossil fuels, including natural gas.
So that's great, thanks. So, but what if somebody chooses the middle option, right, where they're using fossil fuels, but they're adding the photovoltaics and, you know, something for an electric car? And what if it's a major renovation?
That would probably be the most expensive option, going fossil fuels and PVs, because you incur the additional cost of a gas-fired heating system, the cost of piping the home for gas, the cost of bringing gas to the street, plus the PV.
Right, but if I have a home, like, let's say I want to do a major renovation on my home here, I have a high energy efficiency furnace, I have air conditioning, but I just want to do a major renovation. Now I'm going to also need to add the solar panels. Unfortunately, my house roof is facing the wrong way. But you know, what is the cost add for me to do those additional things? You know, because if I'm doing a renovation, it doesn't necessarily mean I'm going to rip out everything I have and put a whole new heating system.
Yeah. So my responses earlier were for new construction. When you get into major renovations, the economics become a little bit more complicated, because if if you already have gas, and I have to admit, we haven't looked at all the permutations and combinations in terms of the renovation and additions components. Again, against propane, I'll make a general statement that heat pumps pretty much win the day against propane. Propane and electric resistance here are the most expensive ways to heat your home. Against fuel oil, until fairly recently, heat pumps, efficient electric homes also won the day. Fuel prices have been bouncing around a lot, and it's kind of hard to make a blanket statement right now. And against natural gas will typically result in slightly lower operating costs. But again, depending what renovations you do to your house, whether you're switching out your heating system or not, if you're switching out your central air conditioner, and a furnace or boiler, that's more expensive than just putting in a central heat pump, assuming you have the ductwork in place. And it gets complicated because some people will put mini splits in versus central heat pump, and there are cost savings there in some cases, but not all cases. Sorry, I'm not giving you maybe the definitive answer you want, but
I'm gonna ask that we pause on the sort of any more kind of deep diving or
There are restrictions.
And I wonder if
This
there
is our opportunity to do that though, Barney, because we have them here.
No, I know, but I'm thinking about our agenda, Nathan, and we're very behind, and we have some substantial things to get through. I was just going to ask if there are any sort of broad, other questions around other aspects of this opt-in stretch code that people want to raise, and then we can decide as a board, do we want to have a more full discussion before we have to decide whether or not this is we want to recommend this to actually be on the warrant. David.
Yeah, I have a broad, I mean, what's the ask here? Is the ask that we make this extra code mandatory? I think Deb pointed it out in the beginning. Is the ask that we would have at town meeting a vote, and if people support it, it's 6 months later, it becomes the law. So then all these things these scenarios that Nathan is identifying become what you have to do. Is that the ask?
Yes, to a certain extent. But Nathan, I was just going to think additions, the additions don't have to have such a high HERS rating. Because we recognize that the renovating houses is much harder to achieve the same HERS rating. And also there is an element, if you can't have PV because your roof is orientated the wrong way or it's shaded on an existing house, you don't need to put it in. So there's a bit more flexibility on renovations. You also has to be a complete gut refurb, and additions have to be over 1,000 square feet. So otherwise you just drop down to the stretch code.
I have a general question, which is, what do we know about those that are doing building in Carlisle, the contractors that are currently working here, about their understanding about the current stretch code? What do you call the current one? The one that's already been passed, it's in effect?
The stretch code.
The basic stretch code. And then my further question is, how big a learning curve is it going to be for if Carlisle were to adopt the opt-in portion of this stretch code that you're proposing? Because 6 months does not seem a heck of a long time for the people that are going to be having to implement this into their building plans. And similarly with our building inspector, I'd be interested to know what his and I think Ryan, you may have had some conversation with him, sort of what his feeling is. But more broadly, do you have any sense of where contractors are here in Carlisle and their ability to actually follow these requirements?
I know that Adam and Beasley are already building passive houses, so and winning awards for them. So they're obviously up to speed. So I think the higher end contractors, they've been building very highly efficient houses already. So this is not such a big leap as for maybe the smaller contractors who are having to get up to speed. That says, the state are providing training for people. It's not like they're leaving the contractors in the lurch. They're providing a lot of the videos will be on YouTube so that it's accessible for contractors at any point in time. So there are, I mean, the state isn't leaving people. They understand the problem that that faces the industry. It's an aging industry, and so they are aware. They're not leaving people high and dry. Put it that way.
Ryan, do you have go ahead, Glenn.
Yeah, and I'll note quickly that Woodward Village is being built by the same developer who did Mill Run, and I'm just spacing on the other adjacent development. In Concord, those are all electric, and I would anticipate that he would have little, if any, difficulty meeting the requirements of the opt-in stretch code.
Ryan, do you have any comment in terms of the town hall discussion about this?
Yeah, I would want them to comment here, Barney, on what this is, but I would want to make sure that we leave enough time to understand where the town exists within the other towns that have adopted this as well. So whether or not we want to be leading in this effort or working towards being one of the first to adopt it, I think is an important discussion.
I can find that out.
I have another question, and that is, if you know how many building starts are scheduled, and if we were to wait until our October town meeting to, in order to have enough time to socialize this and discuss it and do everything else, and then we would, instead of having the July start, we would have January start, right?
No, you went the opposite way.
I went the wrong way.
Well, we wouldn't start till July 24.
What if we do it in May? 6 months takes you to December or to January 1st.
Yeah.
Okay, so yes, it'll go then to the following July.
Yeah. So we lose another year effectively, or 9 months.
Right. But in the past few years, we haven't been doing that many houses.
No, we've been doing 6 or 7, apart from not counting Woodward Village, and I think that's been permitted because that's just one contractor.
Right.
It's not. I can't speak. John Mativier can speak to that. But
yeah, no. What I'm just saying is, how many houses would fall through the cracks? That's what I guess what I'm asking. If we waited an extra 6 months, is it really urgent to do it right now, or if we only miss 1 or 2 houses, maybe it's better to ensure that you get it past the town meeting by having everybody be on board and understanding.
Yeah, I understand that, but I'm just so concerned about the number of sites that we have. This is a way more sites that we have that are ready to be built than we've had in a long, long time. We've had we had Lionsgate that was developed. We've had the Woodward Village, which obviously it was 18, but the Valentine Farm and East Riding, and there's a few other 1 and 2 sites around. That's where you get the 22 from. It's there. There's a hot housing market.
Okay.
That I can't predict the future. I'm just saying that this is.
I know, but we do know how many A&Rs there are and how many special permits. So I guess that's what I was sort of asking was how
it's 22.
It's 22. It's not sites. It's 22.
Well, all the Valentine Farm is done, and East Riding is done, and then there's a site off East Street that's.
Yeah, but when I'm trying to differentiate between sites and building sites.
They're building sites. They are A&R'd.
Okay, so it's 22 houses, not 22 lots that could each have, let's say, 10 houses.
Yes.
That's what I was trying to get at.
Yes.
That's the number. That's the kind of the max number that could. And if they don't start before July 1st of 2025.
No, it's permit, it's the building permit. So they could all permit in November before, if we had voted for it, they could all permit in November and they would be under.
They would be exempt.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Travis, did you have something you wanted to say earlier or ask about?
No, I just thought this is it's an important discussion, but this is kind of the first blush at it. And I think we could ask lots of questions and I think we should. And I think this needs to be vetted pretty thoroughly. So I was just going to suggest that I know we have a full agenda tonight too.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree. And Debbie, I really appreciate this first presentation from you. I think we all do. Thank you, Glenn. And we will we definitely need to discuss this further before we make a decision about the May warrant. So it being on the warrant. So we will definitely be back in touch.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks a lot.
You can have your screen back.
Thank you.
Thanks. And then Ryan, do you want to talk to us about the senior property tax exemption? Again, this is a sort of a briefing for us. We don't have to decide tonight, but we do have to decide soon.
Yes, so this has been discussed with the staff, myself, but mostly Joan was championing this program and then worked with the Board of Assessors and the assessing department to discuss a senior means tested property tax exemption. So this would be a petition to the state to amend state law to allow a local option for a property tax exemption as laid out here. So the Council on Aging have been looking for ways to reduce the tax burden for certain seniors in financial need. And this is coming from their ARPA work and investigation on some folks that do need support, especially in light of today's tax climate and inflation and all the different costs that affect our vulnerable populations. Many other towns have adopted similar programs. A lot of this is built off of other means tested senior property tax exemption programs that towns have petitioned the state legislature to approve. So this would go into effect once the state was able to take it on, so probably next spring. Data you're seeing here is what the COHS was able to do with their ARPA grant for home heating assistance. The reason why this is relevant is it would be a similar population. So they had this criteria in front of you here and found 16 households were eligible and received assistance through this program. So a very good program with a high impact for Carlisle. This is a similar demographic to what they would be targeting with a senior tax exemption. Another important program that is part of this is the circuit breaker program. So the reason why Joan included this in the analysis was they'd like to use the circuit breaker criteria for the basis of this tax exemption. And that provides an easy way to vet candidates since it is means tested. And what she believes would be a consensus feeling on people who would be eligible for this benefit. So if you look at, this is a comparison of the criteria, and it's probably, the most important part of this discussion. So for the circuit breaker program, the person needed to be 65 years or older, have an income of, as an individual, 64,000 or 96,000 as a couple, an assessed home value not to exceed 912,000, and there is no asset limit. So there's no investigation of assets. The proposed eligibility for this tax exemption program is a person who's 70 years or older. The income would be the same as circuit breaker, so would the home value limit, and then they would include an asset limit like they did with the home heating assistance program of $500,000, excluding someone's home, and the benefit would be twice what the circuit breaker benefit is, which is $1,200. So this would be a up to $2,400 tax credit. The estimated cost of this program, and I think this analysis is pretty strong, about 14 households would qualify for this program. That would mean a max benefit of $33,600. I'm not sure why that's not 28,000. I will investigate that, but double, if 14 houses qualified for the 24,400, that would be the max. This line would come into play in the tax levy analysis under the abatements and exemptions line, which would need to be increased. So there is a cost to the town for this program. The governor is also including a proposal in the FY24 budget to double the circuit breaker maximum benefit from 1,200 to 2,400. So we would need to make sure that the language of this matched our intent. So if that was to increase, we wouldn't necessarily want to double this benefit, but that's included in there for your consideration. So I know, although this isn't the very first time you've seen it, it's the very first time you've seen the details in a presentation from Joan. So would like to know what else you would like to know about this program so that maybe we could have a deeper discussion about it on the 28th.
I have a question. Ryan, I'm not completely following. So I kind of understand. I think I understand the tax abatement, right? So people get, if you meet the criteria, you get a relief on your taxes. Circuit breaker to me is like from the school side is when the unexpected jolt, like we got kind of a circuit breaker on our assessment with Concord Carlisle. Like it's a sudden 1-year dislocation, and at least in the special ed world, they smooth it out a little bit. So I don't understand the mechanics of circuit breaker in this regard.
You could equate the two. They're different programs, but this is circuit breaker for seniors paying their taxes.
Right, but circuit breaker implies like it's a one-time rebate effectively for a big step up. I'm not seeing that here, so I'm not understanding. I understand the abatement, right? The exemption. Like if you make only a certain amount, then we're going to cut your taxes. I get that. I don't understand the other one.
Ryan, go back to your slide that has the red print on it, because that explains it. It's so that your property, what you pay for your property tax.
Yeah.
Well, and in some towns it's 50% of water, but in our case, I don't know.
They said 50% of water. Yeah, I saw that.
Sewer costs. If that exceeds 10% of your gross
Income of that year. Okay, so that is that in addition to the other abatement or instead of?
That's a good question.
Qualify for both.
Yes, you would be eligible for both. The only reason that matters for us is because that's the eligibility criteria they're proposing. But the circuit breaker as a state program wouldn't impact our local funding.
I don't know what you just said. Wouldn't that cost us money, or the state pays for that?
State pays for the circuit breaker program. It's only included here as a basis for the eligibility for a program we're building.
Okay, so circuit breaker exists already then, is what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay, so all you're really asking for is the funding of the abatement.
Yes, not to parse words, but the COAHS is asking for that, yes.
Well, I mean, you collectively, you. So, all right, then I don't know why we spent all this time. Okay, so you got to be a little older and you got to, but you have to make circuit breaker income. So same income level. Seems like you could have explained it simpler, but all right.
I'm just explaining the COAHS's recommendation to you.
Yeah, all right.
Kill the messenger.
Twice the circuit. Okay, all right. I mean, okay, it's fine. It's late and I don't feel like diving in. I think it could have been clearer, but I get it.
Are there any other general questions or things that we would like to know further, and we can revisit this on the 28th? Seeing none, I'm going to go ahead and then thank you, Ryan, for speaking on behalf of the COAHS in this proposal. And if people do have further questions, please shoot those questions to Ryan, and we'll get answers. Now the plan was, maybe we can do this just really quickly, Ryan, is take a look at the other items on the warrant. Obviously the auditorium lighting at the school is on there currently, and we just discussed that when we were talking to Jim O'Shea and to Scott. So I don't think we have to talk anymore about that tonight. But Ryan, do you want to show us the list? Is there anything else on there, Ryan, that you think we want to hear more about, not tonight, but at the meeting on the 28th.
So succinctly, the salary wage table is tentatively approved based on your approval of the budget, because we'll just present that and craft it as we presented you before. Prior year bills is included in your warrant analysis. The 1528 and we're hoping to shave it down a little bit, but $35,000 of legal bills. And then the operating budget, that's obvious. The addition here is to reduce the tax rate. That's free cash for the operating budget. I've just included explicitly in there. Council needs it. Capital equipment is still ongoing with your budget discussions. The Corey Auditorium lighting is in here. We've discussed the chart of accounts, the Greeno barn. The 2 CPAs are being discussed at CPA and being vetted by legal. I just briefly presented the senior means tested property tax exemption. The town clerk was going to be here, but because of the snow, she'll come back on the 28th to discuss the removal of Saturday voting is the easiest way to describe that. Acceptance of General Law 41, Section 110A. You have the adding Martin Street to the scenic bylaw, the stretch code, which you received a presentation on tonight, and then Aubrey will be presenting a version of a HR bylaw on the 28th as well.
Okay, great. Thanks for that review. Let's move on then to the opioid.
Can I ask one question? Ryan, I've never encountered where the use of free cash is separate from the general budget discussion. Is that something new?
It's best practice to either include it in the language of the operating budget, which can confuse people, or to vote it separately.
But okay, so that presents a different problem, which is what happens if that gets voted down, then what?
Then
You've passed the budget and then you don't like the way it's being funded?
Then we would increase people's taxes.
Okay.
Very unpopular vote.
And council recommends we do it that way?
I'm adding it in there as a placeholder for council to tell us the best way to do it. They could just roll it into the operating budget article.
I guess I want to go on record saying that's not a good practice in my mind. Anytime you create the possibility for this weird dichotomy, now you've kind of, I don't know. We'll talk about it some other time, but I want to say in the public meeting, I don't think that's a good practice. If I'm wrong statutorily, I accept that, but I've never seen that before.
All right, thank you.
I just have one comment to make about the capital equipment Corey Auditorium. One of the big selling points on that in their presentation was the fact that somebody had to go on a ladder to change the things, the bulbs. I understand from the mosquito article that they used a lift, which I think is a very smart idea. But it kind of cuts the legs off the ladder, so to speak.
That's
the argument.
Concerns.
Is that a metaphor, Kate?
Yeah. That's exactly what it is.
Do you want me to comment on that? Because I didn't say that.
No, that's okay.
Noted.
Let's move ahead, everybody, and go to the opioid settlement discussion, in which we do need to, I'm hoping to have a motion at the end of the conversation. But please, Brian, thanks for the presentation.
So I had sent in or I discussed previously, the town administrator report, the dollars that are involved in the acceptance of the statewide opioid. If the board chooses to accept it, then we receive those dollars. There's still some lack of clarity on the funding for it, but at its base level, we need to spend those dollars on opioid mitigation type programming. How we do that is not clear, but that's really not the board's main concern. So the Resident Services Committee came up with a bunch of potential uses. This is just a brainstorm. It was a very good discussion in talking about being collaborative, being regional. We would hone in on some of these and bring them to you for sure. The decision tonight that needs to happen is whether or not you want to accept those funds. If you don't accept those funds, the only benefit is that you could sue the companies yourself as a select board, which is probably going to be more expensive than the amount you would take. So we're strongly recommending that you accept these dollars from the state and that we spend them on opioid mitigation strategies for the next few years.
Can you go show us the dollar amount, or you had that somewhere, didn't you?
It was in the previous slide. I can.
Yeah. But also just note that we did accept, there was another settlement previously, and we accepted those funds and we still have them. We haven't spent them on anything yet. So this would be added to those funds. And then we receive them over sort of on a yearly basis, Ryan? Is that how it was going to work?
Each deal is different. So it's from, some of them are 5-year deals all the way up to 15-year deals. We get the funding each year.
Yeah, okay.
I
But-
move that the select board accept the opioid settlement funds.
So I have a second.
Kate can second.
David, did you second it?
Sure.
Okay, thank you. Any discussion?
So yeah, I want to, obviously we should accept, but I do have two sort of questions for you, Ryan. One is, in the memo you produced in the packet, you list things that aren't specifically related to drug treatment. There's just general mental health things. Is that true? Then we're not constrained to just purely drug related things.
There's a broad, like ARPA, kind of a
Okay,
broad
okay.
definition of applications.
And
So
then
we
the
would be-
second, good, that's good. And then the second question, I looked at some of that financial mumbo jumbo that's in the packet, but it seems like it goes into the general fund, but it's restricted in use. So how is that actually monitored then? Is it just honor system?
So that is the lack of clarity. So we're discussing whether it's a special revenue fund, whether it would be a warrant article appropriation like PEG funds.
Yeah.
Or if we just simply keep napkin math of free cash usage. So we need to clarify that before July.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Yeah.
Barney, this is the chart here.
Thank you. Thank you. Any other questions, comments before we vote on this? We have a motion on the floor. All right, let's move ahead then and take a roll call vote on the motion, please. All those in favor? Arnold, aye.
Brown eye.
Odell, I.
Reed, aye.
Snell, aye.
Yes.
All right, thank you. That passes. Then let's move on to the house doctor on-call designer selection part of the agenda, and we have 4 separate motions here. Ryan, do you want to lead off on this one? I know Kate was on the committee.
I'm happy to just make the motion with,
Okay,
and then, we can,
do we
I move-
need each one separately, or can we?
make them all at once.
You can do it. once.
Yeah, I move to award a 3-year house doctor on-call design services contract to the following firms: CSS, GNAP, and Lyro. A building envelope to award a 3-year house doctor on-call design services contract to the following firms: Gale and Socotec. Civil engineering to award a 3-year house doctor on-call design services contract to Gale and Niche. And for the MEP, which is mechanical and plumbing, and to award a 3-year house doctor on-call design services contract to the following firms: BLW, GGD, and Lyro.
Second.
Yeah, we have a second then from David. Or is that Nathan?
Modell.
Yeah, David Modell. Okay, thanks. Any discussion about this?
Good job, good job.
I want to say that it was a good team. I would say, we had a couple of engineers on that team. Lots of people that were involved in many building projects for many, many years. And we had lots of experience of lots of different engineering consultants such as these. So I think it was a good process. They were carefully vetted and rated on a number of criteria.
Chair Arnold, I have a question that you would have to allow me to ask it. This is John Lavery.
Yeah, hi, John. We don't normally have the general listeners ask questions.
I understand, but it is within your remit.
Yes, it is.
It's a short question.
John, you put me in a very difficult position. All right, go ahead and ask your question very briefly.
Ryan, what is the protocol since you have multiple firms for each designer selection? What is the protocol that you will work through to award any individual one of them a contract?
So it's a good question. It'll be, first of all, we don't have to award a contract to these folks if it's not in our best interest. So we always reserve the right to have the design process be outside of these selected firms. The benefit is the relationship and the project's speed that we can do because we've already gone through the procurement process. So the process very simply is we would create competition between the firms that are within the category, which is why we selected multiple. We would make sure the expertise for this particular project was one that the firm had. We do believe that we have general expertise based off of our scope of work that was provided, but we would ensure each project matched expertise. And then capacity is another concern. So we are trying to get through some of these projects. Like, as you've mentioned a lot, John, we need to get going on some of these DPW projects for health and welfare of our great employees who are out working tonight. So we want the capacity to be able to do projects done, which means we need multiple people sometimes because engineers get busy.
So this is like a preferred list, but if necessary, you will wander about the cabin, for want of a better word to put it.
Yeah, I like your analogy.
Thank you. That's it, Barney.
Thank you, John. All righty, I think we're ready to take a vote on this. The motion's been made and seconded. Roll call vote again, please. All those in favor?
I do think you should see that if there are any questions from the board, since the board.
I thought I did already. I asked if there was any discussion.
Okay, I wasn't sure anybody had a chance to respond before the question.
Well, remember, we talked about this at some length at the.
Any
Yeah.
questions?
Any questions from other board members?
Okay.
All right, thanks for checking. All right, roll call vote, please. Arnold, I.
Brown eye.
Modell, aye.
Reed, aye.
Ally.
And thank you very much, Ryan, and the rest of the committee. I think this will be very helpful in moving things more quickly. So now we get to the town administrator's report. And I know you have one motion in there, Ryan, but why don't you just take us through the whole thing, and we'll take that motion when we get to it.
Okay, a lot of this is just for the board's consumption, so I can be concise. The building department has moved to the Nichols room, and the tax collector treasurer office is nearly moved to the second floor. We're facilitating traffic flow by adding temporary signage and a town hall greeter as people get used to it. This is from the senior work off program, and we're evaluating that greeter program to see if it does improve resident experience. So very simply, what happens is a resident comes into town hall, they are greeted by one of our excellent senior volunteers who is armed with information about who's in the building, who's in meetings, etc., and where people are, so that they can answer that immediate question of where do I go to do X. I think it's a great use of our senior tax work off people, and they're enjoying engaging with the residents, but we will test it and make sure it actually works before we invest in it further. Records archiving began. If you come to town hall, you'll notice there's a lot of filing cabinets missing, and there's a new archive section down in the old treasurer collector section of the town clerk's office. And the database has also been updated so we can properly track these records. The first swing at our records reduction resulted in 30% of those records being removed, which is a significant amount of paper. They were all duplicates or things that were not on the retention schedule and older. So we're only getting rid of stuff we are sure we don't need to keep. It's a lot of continued HR work by Aubrey. She is busy. So we are receiving applications for the driver laborer position that vacated when James Hall moved to foreman. We're also receiving applications for the COAHS director, and hopefully scheduling interviews for that one by April, or both really. We wish Joan goodbye, and Carol tonight was up for appointment, and you did appoint her. You already got an update from the Police Chief Screening Committee. They did excellent work, as we've said a couple times. Frank and Sandy are on the second floor and bringing a lot of personality and fun to their roles, to include professionalism, which is the most important, but they are fun. Sean started as a dispatcher and I believe works today. So welcome to the team as he deals with a nor'easter. And then we started our implementation process with Bamboo HR, which you will see immediate impacts once we get it up and running, and our ability to share information with you. Carlisle did receive Chapter 90 allocation from the governor's budget of 200 million. It's a bond bill attached to her budget. The 252,918 is what we received of that 200 million. That's our allocation. We're strongly asking our elected officials in town to tell the state that's not enough. It would take, at least based off of the MMA and STAM's estimations, 330 million or a 65% increase in that allocation to help us even keep up, never mind take care of the backlog of road work that we need to do. And then you received your finance committee budget and information from their deliberations already. For procurement, we awarded SWSS the library PFAS treatment system contract, and they're working on scheduling that. We talked about the on-call design services. I just sent out tracks to Michael Hightower of Golf Course Management Inc. for the recreation's annual maintenance and organic programming bids. And then Steve Bassick is still waiting for the Induct smoke detector, and then also the delivery of the police department's ADA ramp, but we are keeping up on that. And very exciting, I completed the final phase, or the next to final phase of my MC PPO recertification, so that I can be qualified to do this procurement work for you. For the Middlesex County retirement system, this is a regurgitation of what was in my report last time, but a representative will be at your March 28th meeting to facilitate your questions. If you can send those in advance, they will have those ready and answered for you. So all that will remain is anything that comes up from their presentation. So it'll be a short presentation, and if you have questions about the retirement COLA discussion we talked about at our last meeting, that would be great. We had a very good all chairs meeting. So this is a gathering of chairs to meet with me and to inform each other on things going on around town. Some of the action items that came out of that good discussion was that the ZBA has a vacancy, and that we need a better process for informing us when these vacancies exist, so we're not waiting to fill them. The library trustees brought up maternity leave policies as a future important retention discussion, and they want to bring this to you directly. The Board of Health continues to discuss the importance of protecting our town water supply with a thoughtful approach to ongoing bylaw discussions. The Trails Committee wants to put together a group to work on maintaining the boardwalk at Banta Davis. Unfortunately, there is some things that need to be addressed there, like ongoing maintenance, and they believe it'll be a significant effort. And we're even discussing the idea of a castle playground type approach to fixing that. A lot of committees talked about needing digital storage for maintaining records and records management generally. And then succession planning, which we're working on, as you know, was a hot topic. The seniors made an impassioned plea for gathering space. The Council on Aging and Human Services made an impassioned plea for more senior gathering space, and that be included in current building discussions like the expanded public space or town hall discussions, and that senior housing is a key need moving forward, as you know. And then the committees like finance and sustainability offered support to all these boards for their planning and coordination efforts. So this will be a quarterly meeting for us as a staff to provide information to boards and committees. The next one will be in June. We'll be focusing on volunteer onboarding for the select board's guidance. And as Barney referenced, the one action item I have for you today is the Carlisle Poppy Project is requesting use of the town common for the 2023 Memorial Day display for the weekend of 20 to 21 May to the weekend of 3 to 4 June. If you want to take that up now, or I can finish and then you can take it up, it's up to you.
Oh, why don't we do that right now? I think we're all familiar with the Poppy Project that has been held on Town Common for several years now, thanks to Debbie Bentley and many other great volunteers. So this is a proposal that we've received before this time. They're talking about a maze and using more of the common, but making sure it's worked out with the, any other users of the Town Common. So I would like, unless folks want more information on this, I'd like to just have a motion, please, to.
I've got it. Motion, I move to approve the Carlisle Poppy project and authorize the use of part of the Town Common for the 2023 Memorial Day display from the weekend of 2021 of May to the weekend of 3-4 of June.
Thank you. We have a second.
Second.
David, you seconded. Any discussion or questions?
I always look forward to the Poppy project. It looks gorgeous and it's been, very distinctive, and I'm proud of
Yes.
being able to come and ask. I've invited people to come and look at it. Good project.
Yes, it is. All right, let's do a roll call vote, please, on the motion. All those in favor, Arnold, I.
Brown eye.
Modell, aye.
Reed, aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Poppy project motion carries unanimously. Staff recognition.
Yep, I've been talking to Jim Hall all day. I just texted him. The DPW workers are still out. They still expect to be trading shifts until midnight and beyond to clean up when the snow finally stops. The police and fire were out responding to vehicles off the road and a down wire today. We put some of that on social media, but while some of us were able to work at home, the public safety officials are out doing hard work and keeping us safe. So definitely want to recognize them. My funny comment about Joan is I'm sick of saying goodbye to her, but my real comment is I hope I have half the impact that she has on this town when I'm done, and I wish her luck in Weston. They're getting a great employee. Kelly put together a lot of the work on COLA and wage increases and a lot of the budget background that has been allowed you to focus your discussions on things other than just straight numbers. Without her, we would be lost. She is a key employee and has done tremendous amount of work quickly to make sure that you have everything you need to make decisions. So she's a really important part of this discussion in the background. And then Julie, same thing for a lot of your discussions. She volunteered to work with me to call references on the house doctor designers, worked with Jack in the last couple of weeks to ready your discussion about the master plan in a couple of weeks. And then she's helping me with digitally storing files and making things accessible. So we're reducing versioning errors. So she's paying off. She's helping the town organize and improve, and she's just a great addition to the team. Some admin for you to review, and then, Madam Chair, I have the tentative agenda for the 28th.
Right, and so we, I think if people have comments, maybe what we should suggest, given the hour, is that they shoot those to Ryan. David and Ryan and I will meet tomorrow afternoon to sort of finalize this, and also figure out whether we're meeting next week to interview the finalist for the police chief position, and whether we might do some other work at a meeting next week as well. So I think we've discussed tonight some additional things that need to be on this agenda, and certainly we're going to have the budget, a further discussion about the budget on this agenda, which is not there currently. Any comments quickly on the draft budget? All right. And there are no minutes. Anybody have a liaison report they'd like to make very briefly? All right, hearing none, I'd like a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you very much. Any discussion? Well, everybody, I'm glad we don't have to drive home, and a big thank you to our DPW, and I hope everybody has a good evening. The meeting is, oh, I guess we need a roll call vote to adjourn. Arnold, I.
Right.
Really.
Reed, aye.
Bye.
All right. Thank you all very much.
Good night, everyone.
Good
Good
night.
night.
I was